Okay. Unmuted.
PDF comes up. Links on. Yeah, the whole packet. See if I did the PDF. Everything comes up. HTML, what it is.
Slowly. Stand the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's time we can have topics from the floor that are not on the planning agenda. If you have something you want to do for the planning commission, it's not on the agenda. Okay.
I will. All right, so I originally had come to talk about item B, which I guess I should wait until that comes up. But I wanted to make one note is that your website is not working. None of the documents available on the site are coming down. I got emailed some information about item B, but there's a staff report that I didn't get and is not available. And but then while I was noticing that, so I don't know if that affects your public hearing if you don't have the documents available, but you should be aware of that none of those documents are available.
Brady, if I could, I noticed the same thing when we're going to the HTML, but also when you have the options on the PDF comes up with all of the documentation. But I did notice what you were saying about when it's just the.
Say that again if you.
So when I go to the meetings agenda here,
Yeah.
and you can choose either the PDF or the HTML. I'm finding the HTML links don't work to the agenda.
What the PDF does.
The
I think
the entire PDF comes up with the accompanying documents.
Okay, I guess I'll try that one, but I know I tried to open them and I couldn't. But I just thought you should be aware of that. But then the thing that then wanted, and I don't know how this exactly works for the planning commission, was the proactive planning commission framework discussion, which might.
This is first item not on the agenda. So we're going to be.
Okay, so you don't, so you will have that opportunity to talk about that then or not?
That's not a public hearing item, so he can speak to items that are, yeah.
I didn't
Well,
realize.
so I wasn't exactly sure what it meant. I was gonna try and look at your minutes, which again, I couldn't bring up because they were the preliminary minutes because they were not available. But if it is what I think it sounds like it is, that the planning commission is planning on having a more proactive stance on items that come to the city, I would fully support that. I think that's needed. My perspective as a person, I hear lots of things that come to the planning commission, and it seems like no one has ever denied anything. Either the staff approves it and a variance, or else it comes to you guys and you approve it, or if you don't approve it, it goes to city council and they approve it, or then they appeal it to LUBA. And to me, that would be my question is how many times does if someone apply for a variance that it actually is denied versus approved at some point in time via approval? And to me, it seems like that requires a little more proactive response from the planning commission, because it's like, why do we have ordinances if all you have to do is ask for variance and then they always get approved?
We have denied variances in the past.
Have you? Do you know what percentage?
No, it's a small percent, but it happens every once in a while.
Okay. Do you know what the percentage is, by?
Not offhand, but
Yeah, I'd be curious about what percentages are applied for and actually get denied, and not necessarily by you, but either by the city council or through, appealing to LUBA.
One thing about the planning commission is things are items often brought by the planner. They've already worked a lot of things through with the applicants. things that may not have a chance of passing all the muster of all the ordinances and stuff, likely don't come to us so much. Say that.
Yeah, I think a planning commission could be akin to a jury. And if you know you're gonna go to a jury trial, you wanna have a higher level of confidence in your application. And so we work with an applicant. We don't work with them to fail, we work with them to succeed. So sometimes an application just, it just doesn't work. But part of it is, as Commissioner or Chair Kerry was talking about, is that upfront discussion with the applicant is partly reflective in the higher rate of approvals versus denials. Without that proactive, I think statistically you would have a greater percentage of denials, partially based on people's just ignorance of the process and law.
Well, thank you.
Hi, I'm Colleen Oler, and I read the procedural rules. And we can speak on that, right, you said? Okay, I found it very difficult to follow. I was very grateful for an example at the end, because then I understood what you were saying, just because I'm not a person who speaks legalese, so it was a lot of, for a regular person, it's a lot of double talk. But I did have a question. Would citizens be allowed to participate and get involved, either in like subcommittees or participate in an area, depending on what the intention of the plan was? So if we wanted to get involved in doing maybe a small park on the waterfront or that type of thing, could we as citizens not being on the commission be involved in that, either on a committee or on a subcommittee?
Well, if the council wants to create an ad hoc committee, that would be outside of the planning commission.
Okay.
Now, the planning commission may have a subcommittee within itself to
Okay.
have a couple people focus on some things. I think the important thing is recognizing the planning commission is the planning commission and acting historical landmarks commission.
Mhm.
So if you're talking about a park, chances that would be
Parks and Recreation.
Parks and Rec.
I just meant for planning.
And so let's say the planning commission said, well, we wanna talk about widget sticks.
Yes.
And you as a citizen see that in the agenda, oh, widget sticks, wow, God, I've been waiting for the planning commission to talk about that for years.
Mhm.
This is a meeting open to the public, and so you could see that, you can attend
Mhm.
and participate as you are now.
But not actually participate in the planning or anything. So
Well, I mean, it would depend, so
on what it
let's,
was for.
yeah, and
Okay.
so if it's, well, should the city council allow widget sticks in people's homes or not? Maybe
Mhm.
that's just a legislative thing and the planning commission reviews it and says yes, or, well, let's figure out how we multiply widget sticks.
Mhm.
And then maybe the planning commission, well, God, maybe the council should have an ad hoc committee about that. The commission recommends that. I think it's gonna really depend on the circumstances.
So mostly no.
Well, hang on a second.
Yeah.
Ms. Oler,
Yes.
I like your button, by the way.
Oh.
So tonight's a night actually where the planning commission is going to discuss how we're thinking about making proactive decisions.
I'm really excited about that.
And do you think, for some decisions, do you think citizen involvement in a committee signed by the planning commission would be a good thing?
I think if it was something that they were passionate about, that would be wonderful. I think you're all obviously very passionate about what you do, just as I am, like I'm in Halloween. Although I'm the queen of Halloween town.
Oh, you are?
So, yeah.
Okay.
So that's something no need to bow, I'm not in uniform. But that's something I'm extremely passionate about, and if it came to something like that, I would love to be involved.
Yeah, I don't think that, right now is a night that we're gonna talk about what we're gonna do and how we're gonna do it, and I can envision times where the planning commission potentially, depending on how we decide to do things. We'd say, yeah, we'd like citizen involvement in this process in the subcommittee format. And how would we go about doing it? Maybe sometimes, maybe, I don't know, but definitely all of the processes will include the public, without a doubt.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
One thing you can be involved with,
Yes.
there are times that you can comment pro or against or neutral on any hearing that we have.
That's great.
Um,
Yeah, I'm
see that
trying to get a
hearing,
little
like
bit more.
this- Like this variance, for instance, you could come up front and give some input that we'll consider. Yeah,
Wonderful.
appreciate that input.
Great. Thank you so
for
much.
coming.
Another topic. 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Molly Matchek. I'm the owner of Molly's Market. I'm here on my brother and myself's behalf on just being a business owner on First Street and just being, seeing all these changes coming up and happening and just seeing it kind of go in a good direction and having more eyes on certain things that are happening. So that's what I'd like to see going forward. I love it. This panel knows I love this town. We're invested in this town, so we just want to see good things happen and people's eyes on things and, just working all together. That's why I'm here. All right, thank you.
Interesting day. We usually don't have any topics on the floor. Okay.
Wait.
I wasn't gonna ask a question, but I was upstairs and I saw this going on. I'm like, oh, there's a lot of people down there. I need to maybe ask a question. And my question is, I know that you're in charge of or oversight for the historic planning for the town. Do you work like, how are you different from the actual historical society, like with Les and Jennifer? Do you work with them, or do you have a different pocket that you work with as far as historical buildings go?
We have a different role.
Okay,
Yeah, I think as far as it's the historical
Landmarks Commission.
landmarks commission.
okay,
So I think basically dealing with landmarks that have been officially recognized or identified as such legally and determining that, and then also looking at possibility of determining other kinds of landmarks. We work with the Museum Association, the Historical Association, in terms they provide a lot of background and information about that sort of thing, but they're two distinct.
okay. So are there any policies in place that have to do with buildings that are historical and maybe are landmarks, but they're not really being taken care of, but there's clearly an owner there? Are they able to just let them basically melt into the ground until there's nothing left of them before? I mean, do you have any authority over that?
You mean demolition by neglect?
Yes. Yeah,
That's in the code.
okay. Yeah, I was just wondering if you can read that somewhere and get a hold of it.
Yeah, it's in the code.
Okay.
When you use the term landmark too, it's a
It
very
might not be,
definition and
okay.
there are designations for certain properties, so that term, we throw it around like, oh, it's a landmark, but it's not.
maybe not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you can look up that map and see what is designated.
okay.
We do help make decisions of in the historic district, changes the styling of signs and that the character that is stylized, the style, the pattern that we.
Yeah.
Code.
Right on. Thank you so much.
So that's the last one. Okay, all right, thank you. Wow, that was exciting. First, we just did nothing. Do you have any comments on draft minutes from last meeting?
I do. The draft minutes at page 7 of 8, I believe. There should be another motion documented in the minutes. There was a motion made at, I checked the record at 3 hours, 20 minutes, 40 seconds. I made a motion for a resolution that the planning commission will be a proactive planning commission in addition to its other duties that is already doing. And that was seconded by Commissioner Webster, and the votes were ayes: Webster, Pugsley, Toskey, Hubbard, Carey, and Semling. And I tried to find that, I did not see a vote by Commissioner Lawrence. That should be, that motion on that resolution. So the motion and the resolution should be reflected in the minutes.
Okay, can I make a motion that we accept the minutes as amended? Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's now 7:15. The public hearing is now open. Oh, it's not yet. Sorry.
One more item.
Right, I keep missing that. Come on, look at it. Looking forward to a water master plan. The Keller Association.
Well, we're glad to be here. I'm Peter Olson with Keller Associates, project manager for the Water Master Plan.
Trenton Buster with Keller Associates, project engineer on the water.
We're glad to be here at this time, at the towards the end of the project, as we're kind of summarizing things, and so our purpose here is to summarize the results of the Water Master Plan. And you've received a copy of the full report. This will be a Cliff Notes version of the report summary. So going to the first slide after this. This is a similar slide we had with the stormwater and the wastewater master plans when we presented those, but the need and the purpose, really we're looking at what the planning criteria are for the water system. How do we want to evaluate it? Comparing the existing facilities with that criteria, and then evaluating how it's going to look with the future demands as the city and the demands on the system grow. We utilize a hydraulic computer model to assess that system for that, other than its existing conditions as far as buildings and things like that. We make recommendations for the improvements that will address any deficiencies that were indicated and summarized there, and then create a capital improvement plan, which is a summary of those recommended improvements for that. And then we document that all in the report that you've seen. Next one. This slide here is population projections, and the growth is similar, if not the same as the wastewater and the stormwater master plans, and that's intentional so that we're being consistent with where that growth is estimated to occur, and with any good plan that that will adjust and change over time, but that's kind of the snapshot in time. Next one. And please do jump in with any questions. If I'm going too fast or if I'm going too slow, you can yell at me as well, but let me know if you have any questions. This slide here with the water usage, this is just documenting the types of users, wholesale, commercial, industrial, residential, those main user groups, how much they use of the total volume of water that's delivered through the system. And then the chart there on the bottom shows throughout the year what are the demands. And you can tell it's typical for most systems during the summertime, the irrigation season, those demands do grow, and that shows for 5 different 2016 through 2020, and what those demands looked for each month. Next one. The daily demand trends, so that instead of looking at it in the whole year, that figure on the left looks at it in a day. So that unit curve shows what that usage looks like throughout the day. And that volume, the shaded in area on the top is what you would need to have in storage to be able to be consistent with that consistent daily demand and average throughout the day. And it's not untypical to see that in the early morning hours, which would be during your summertime peak usage, when folks would be irrigating. On the right there is just the different types of demands. We have average day, max day, peak hour demands for the system. And we compare what we observed with the data for the city of St. Helens with other communities in the region, and to give you a snapshot of what that looks like and how those compare. For the unaccounted for water, this is 5-year average is 18.5%. If the target is 10% or less, set by the American Water Works Association, AWWA, if you're at that 10% or less, you're doing good, and there's not likely any drastic measures you need to do to reduce the unaccounted for water. Unaccounted for water, the potential sources are listed there with hydrant flushing, construction, but sometimes the biggest culprit are uncalibrated meters or just unknown system leakage. I know city staff and operations staff, engineering and operations staff have been replacing water meters throughout the system, so I feel confident that they're in a good direction there as far as mitigating unaccounted for water due to that. Next slide. So the projected water demands, again, this is just looking at documenting the previous slide. We had talked about what the historical data showed for the different demands for average day, month, max day, and peak hour. These are just projecting those forward using population and a per capita rate. Shows what the 20-year planning period would project for what those demands need to be, and therefore what we are planning for and inputting into the hydraulic computer model to reflect what the system will be in the 20-year time period. So our regulatory criteria that we use to analyze the system or evaluate its storage, it just shows the operational peaking, fire protection, and standby emergency storage that makes up the total volume of storage that is recommended that is provided by the system. And there's different nuances about each one of those, the 4 different types of storage there. The fire flows, they are depicted for residential, commercial, and for as it is with most systems, the industrial fire flow recommendation of 3,500 gallons per minute for the 4 hours is what dictates the amount of fire protection storage that you would want to provide for your system. And we coordinate and collaborate that with the fire department. Distribution pressures reflecting the minimum. We don't want pressures lower than 40 psi with a fire flow not lower than 25. That gives you a buffer with the health code. And then maximum pressures of 100 is instant pressures, and 80 typical. And that's something I'll steal a little thunder later. For the lower elevations in the city, there are higher pressures normally throughout the system. Next one. So the water filtration facility, in looking at the existing conditions on that facility, it would be as you expected, as you would expect with a newer facility. It's in good condition and does well. What you're looking at there for the filtration facility is normal replacement of short-term assets. The filters themselves need to be replaced on a regular schedule, and you're coming up on that either at or soon at that time frame. So I know city staff are planning for and looking at that schedule of replacing the filters, so they're on schedule and doing what they should be doing. But overall, the filter facility is in good condition and meets future criteria, future demands.
So now that the criteria have pretty much been established, that we have the existing and future demands, we looked at we call it supply and delivery analysis. So the supply is just looking at your available water rights compared to the existing and future water demands. So the table on the left there shows there's a surplus of about 3 million gallons per day. And we also did the delivery, which is the pumping capacity of each of the facilities. So we looked at the system-wide, so that's at the filtration facility, the pumping capacity, and then also looked at the high pressure zone and the higher Elk Ridge pressure zone. And those are all looking good with the existing and future demands. There's no deficit, no need to install bigger pumps. So that looks good there. Next slide. So now with the storage analysis, we broke apart into the 4 storage components that Peter mentioned: operational, peaking, fire, and emergency. And so with the existing water demands, we looked at 2 scenarios. One with the 2 million gallon reservoir offline as it's operated today. And so with that reservoir offline, there is a storage deficit. But if it were to come online with the existing water demands, that deficit goes away and there's a surplus of about 1 million gallons. Looking into the future demands, this is assuming the 2 million gallon reservoir is online. There is a projected deficit with the future demand. So this indicates there's going to be a need to construct future water storage to meet the growing water demands. Next slide. As Peter mentioned, we developed a hydraulic model. This lets us look at the pressures throughout the system and look at specifically what each of the pumping facilities are doing. So the development of this model included updating all the pipes, pumps, and storage reservoirs since the last water master plan. We conducted fire hydrant testing in summer 2021, and this gets data points in the actual water system that we input into the model, so we can compare and make sure that the model is putting out results that are representative of the actual system. We allocated the water demands and then assigned the control settings that were reported. And then we have the hydraulic model to use to look at the different scenarios. So this slide, we look at the average day demand. So this is your annual demand divided by 365 days. And we use this to look at identify high pressures because the demands are lower compared to what you would see in the summer. So the pressures would be higher overall. The second scenario we look at is peak hour demand. So this is, you remember the curve from a couple slides ago, that peak hour demand that the water system is going to see in the summertime. And then we look at maximum day plus fire flow. This is going to be the highest water demand that a system is going to experience. It's a hot summer day and then a fire flow event happens. So we look at that. Next slide. So looking into some of these model results, this is system-wide, this is average day demand. And what we'll look at here is just the blue dots kind of toward the river. Those indicate pressures over 80 PSI. A couple black dots that are over 100 PSI. And then same thing on the west side of the city. In the high pressure zone, there's over 80 PSI. And then we looked at peak hour demand. So next slide. So here we were looking for pressures below 40 PSI. Not too many, a couple in the main pressure zone there, and then up north above Pittsburgh Road. So we looked at improvement projects to correct these lower pressures noted in the capital improvement plan. Next slide. This is existing water demands, maximum day plus fire flow. So a little bit of a busy figure, but green is just showing residentially zoned areas, red is commercial, and purple is industrial. And then the red dots show where fire flow demands are not being met. So where there needs to be some improvements to meet the fire flow established for residential, commercial, or industrial. Next slide.
Just taking it in.
Yeah, I will say, if you want to go back to the previous slide real quick, sorry. This is typical for municipal water systems. The max day demand plus fire flow is the demand scenario that is hardest to meet. Cause you, as Trenton said, there you have your max day demand and a fire flow, which is quite significant for most systems. You know, you're looking at 3,500 in the industrial area. So this is kind of your worst case scenario as far as those fire flow demands dictate most improvements for systems. There's low pressure areas, but as you'll see, some of those low pressure areas also they're coincide typically with the lack in fire flow capacity as well. Go ahead.
Next one too.
No, this one.
That's
This one.
So this is looking at the future water demands, and we've put in pipelines where the anticipated growth is. And this is just to identify where development needs existing system improvements in order to meet the fire flow demand. So the future pipes are shown in black, and then the red dots are the same, not meeting the fire flow. So this indicates there's quite a few developments that would need improvements to the existing water system if they were to connect and meet the available fire flow requirements. And so now that we've looked at pretty much all the components in the evaluation, we start looking at improvements to correct these deficiencies. So we looked at alternatives for kind of the bigger picture items. The only one we'll highlight here in the PowerPoint is the storage alternatives. So this is looking to correct the existing storage deficit with the 2 million gallon reservoir offline. So alternative one would be to repair the existing reservoir and then install a future 4 million gallon reservoir to meet that future storage deficit. And alternative two would be to demolish and replace the existing 2 million gallon reservoir in place and then install a future smaller 2 million gallon reservoir. And so there's benefits and drawbacks to each of those. I won't walk through each of those, but we worked with engineering and operations and came with the recommendation of alternative one for correcting the storage deficit. And so this brings up where to put that future proposed 4 million gallon reservoir. So because it's such a large reservoir, it's restricted by the topography. And then also it needs to be put at the same elevation of the existing tanks so that it's going to be providing the same system pressures to the main pressure zone. So what we came up with was 4 different sites to put this new reservoir. The first one would be at the existing reservoir sites. There'd likely need to be some demolition of existing structures and potentially rerouting of roads to fit that in there. Alternatives 2 and 3 in green and yellow are pretty similar, just right down the road from each other, but it's quite a long length of pipe and it goes through private property, so we need to do easements. So we came up with recommending alternative 4 in orange. The site, we would anticipate the least amount of grading and earthwork needed to construct it on that site. And then also the pipe would be mostly installed in the Sykes Road right of way. So that's a plus, and then connect right into the main pressure zone there. Slide. So we looked high level at the existing operations and maintenance activities that are being done for the water system and recommended, typical O&M activities. I won't walk through each of these, but I will highlight the reporting for completing an annual water audit to continue to calculate that unaccounted for water that Peter mentioned and see if that's going to get lowered below the current 18.5%. And then something that will likely help with that is implementing a proactive leak detection program. So identifying where leaking pipes are and replacing them to reduce the unaccounted for water. Next slide.
Well, the replacement program is something that is, we look at it at a high level. It's a simple evaluation of looking at all the components, the linear feet of pipe, the number of pumps, and so on, and looking at their estimating their typical useful life. What is the total replacement cost, and then how much, if you were to save up with that typical useful life every year, how much would you need to save to replace those on schedule? It's a big number, and it's a tough one to budget for. But that's, I mean, if you would look at this, look at your own home, right? I mean, if you're looking at a roof replacement, every 40 years, a good roof, so on and so forth. It's the same kind of concept, same kind of process. Everything has its own useful life, and should be planning to be replaced. Next one.
We also looked at the existing staffing level compared to our estimated optimal staffing levels. So it was reported that one full-time equivalent or full-time employee at the water filtration facility is 3.5 FTE for distribution system O&M. So based on typical production rates and what we've seen with other communities, the reported staffing level falls right within what we would anticipate looking at the filtration facility and 3.5 in distribution. And this is assuming they spend all their time on the O&M activities that were outlined on the previous slide. So it's not getting pulled aside for various building maintenance or event setup and takedown.
So the capital improvement plan is kind of the summary of all the recommended projects and solutions to address the deficiencies. We have priority 1, 2, and 3 that include the capital improvement plans for that 20-year time frame. We also have broken out for this master plan priority 4, which is those are those projects that are developer driven. They're in an area that doesn't serve any existing customers, anything. It's will only be needed if there's new development. So we've put those as priority 4. That could happen anytime, right? If you have the crystal ball, when the property owners or whoever going to develop, that's why we don't put that into a priority 1, 2, or 3 specific time frame there. Priority 5 is 20 to 50. Plan for a 20-year planning time frame, but Oregon Health Authority drinking water program is now required. As our other states, seismic resiliency plan. That was a component of the evaluation and report that you saw in the full report. Those look out past 20 years all the way to 50. And so there are portions and recommendations associated with the backbone system that we would recommend designating as the backbone system, and then therefore planning to make improvements so that it can be resilient to a seismic event. And so that's what the priority 5, those that are not already covered in the priority 1, 2, or 3 are then put in that priority 5 component. Next one. So the 6th year, they ask us to provide a 6-year capital improvement plan, looks at those priority 1 improvements and allocate those by year. You'll notice the repair existing 2 million gallon reservoir is a project already underway, has a whole separate evaluation and analysis that the engineering and public works group is looking at. That was not a part of our specific scope, but we want to make sure that it's in the capital improvement plan so that it's properly allocated and budgeted for. Next slide. I do not expect you to read this table. There's no way I can read it, even not from this distance. It shows you the number of projects, but then it also, I'll kind of go through it. It has the project name, the project trigger. Is it development? Is it for fire flows? Is it for low pressure? What's triggering the project? The cost, and then what we do in all our master plans is have the percent SDC eligible. How much of that project is for growth? So that then Mr. Donovan can then take that and plug those numbers into their model for the SDC, developing the SDCs, and conversely the rates. So the other component besides the seismic resiliency plan that was incorporated into this and recommended, we recommended that it's done, is because a lot of components intermingle with the water management and conservation plan that Oregon Resource Department it requires of communities of the water systems. So because they intermingle, it's much more efficient and can be done quickly and simply with a small amount of extra work to complete the water management and conservation plan.
Yeah. So one of the larger components of the water management and conservation plan is updating the water curtailment plan. So in the event of a water shortage, what is the trigger? What are the different stages? So this is mostly based on the previous water management conservation plan, except we did broken into 4 stages. So there's mild, moderate, critical, and emergency. We'll go through each of those. So the first stage would be mild. This is if a water shortage may exist. And the goal would be to reduce water usage by 5%. And this would be done by voluntary irrigation watering schedules, informing the public of the situation, notifying the major water users, and also limiting the hydrant flushing activities. The next stage would be moderate. And the trigger is that a water shortage does exist. The goal would be to reduce by 10%, and this would be done by continuing irrigation schedules, continuing to inform the public, limiting the city water usage, so for fountains, for sidewalk washing, hydrant flushing, and then also restricting vehicle washing. Next stage is critical. This is when there's a threat to the water supply that may reduce the amount of water that can be supplied to the city. The goal would be to reduce by 25%. It's done by limiting swimming pools, hydrant flushing for emergency only, and also restricting park irrigation. And the last stage would be emergency. This is when there's significant supply loss, can't meet the water demand. So target would be to reduce water usage by 50%. This is done by prohibiting irrigation, notifying industrial users and restricting water usage, and then also activating any backup water sources. So for Islands, there's the Bayport well, which isn't used from day to day, but it could be activated as an emergency supplemental water source. And that brings us to the end of our presentation. So we'll open it up for any questions or comments.
The Bayport well only run on in an emergency situation?
That's the way it, is operated.
I rode south a few times and
I mean, it's not.
It has odor issues and so it's shut down now, but we can use it in emergency. We have to issue a boil water notice if we.
or when it's been put on.
Yeah, there's a lot of complaints about it.
City for water come from the Columbia.
All of it,
Yeah.
yeah,
All of it.
yeah.
The Bayport well, all of the city's current water comes from.
The rainy collector wells.
So that Morton had said at a council meeting about the city had rights to like in the strip property.
Oh.
Some
Oh, there is we talked about this with this, actually came up during the city council presentation as well. There is a water right there, but it's not used for the potable water system for the city.
Okay, so I'm just curious about, I don't know whether that's viable alternative to look at potential increased supply or potential emergency type. I don't know what the budget would be on that, but if we have the ability of getting that kind of volume.
If needed, yes, it is a possibility. It would take a significant investment in infrastructure to get to that point. And for curtailment, when you're looking at, if we're talking about curtailment, I don't know if that's specifically, but if we're talking about curtailment, you wouldn't have the time or capability to implement that quick enough.
It's not about future growth.
For future, and it is a possibility. What we're seeing is that you have more than enough capacity and water rights through your existing facilities that if you wanted to have a fully redundant system, you could do that, but it would come at a significant cost that wouldn't recommend at this time.
Just have a few more questions. So I'm sorry if I didn't follow along quickly on this thing, but I heard 3 million gallons a day surplus, and then I heard that because one of the reservoirs is currently offline, and can I get some clarity on that?
Yeah, the 3 million gallon surplus is water rights.
It's water rights, and yeah, the deficit we were talking about was just in those 4 storage components that we talked about. So with the operational, peaking, emergency, and fire flow. And so it's kind of separate from the actual water supply. It's looking at what's actually in for water system storage, not necessarily everything that could come in from the filtration facility.
A couple more questions on increased population. So through 2041, the projection is the population will be 17,000 or 18,000.
Yeah, it was around that.
So what if it's more than that? Let's say it's 25,000 people by 2041. Do we have enough water in that?
I will say if it's more than that, you'll know before then and you'll be able to plan. So this is recommended and part of OHA's recommendations, and we have water master plan update in that 5 to 10 year time frame. So as you grow, if you're growing at a higher rate, you'll have those 5 to 10 year increments to adjust and compensate for that. If you look at that bigger chunk, if you were to have a higher population, you would have higher demands. We would allocate that throughout the system and see what different improvements might be required for those.
In Area 15, there's some, which is the Riverfront. Right now the city's in full swing on trying to implement a pretty large development there. And it could be 200, 300 more residential units, plus businesses. And I noticed it on the graph, that was one of the low pressure fire areas or something. So I guess number one, we have enough water, we can build 400 units, condos, things like that there. And, we're gonna be able to have fire capacity in that area too.
So that area has a high pressure. It's a high pressure area of that main zone. And that is area, if we went towards the very beginning, the first couple slides, that's part of our growth area 2. That's right there.
Sorry.
So that growth area 2, so it is accounted for in the master plan. So that capital improvement plan does account for that allocated demand, or that near future demand, hopefully.
So enough water pressure and enough water for just say condo developments. I think there's a 55-foot, we could build 5-story condos or whatever, and there's going to be enough water pressure and water fire suppression capability.
And there is in the capital improvement plan with that development, there's a development driven improvement to the existing system. I think you saw some of the red dots.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Yeah, so there is in the capital improvement plan, there's a couple existing pipes that need to be upsized in order to meet the fire flow demand.
That's project 4.1 in the capital improvement plan. It's Riverfront district development, so it's all the improvements needed specifically for that.
I had a couple other questions. So
Sure.
The Sykes, so what was the idea? Why would we need the Sykes road? I guess you guys are leaning toward the Sykes road as an area for the storage.
Yeah. So what we did, we looked at not just those 4 locations. We looked, it's kind of a cool analysis. Trenton's a whiz at the GIS, and being able to look at that kind of contour band, it needs to match what those existing reservoirs are at to be able to operate at the same, system pressures and have good operation. There are other areas throughout the town that have that, but when you're looking at a 4 million gallon reservoir, it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit whether it's too close to a creek, river, there's lots of components that we're looking at. Also developable, is it flat enough? Is it, is it on a big hillside we're gonna have to move a mountain in order to be able to build it? And so that one off of Sykes Road was the best solution, one we could see the recommendation when you first start to actually implement that reservoir project is going to do a much more detailed siting evaluation. And you're going to look at the environmental components. You're going to look at property acquisition. You're going to look at drainage, overflow. You know, there's a whole list of components that we would look at in a lot more detail. But from our master plan level, that looks to be the best location.
When do you think that it would be break ground on something like that? Just like,
Sharon?
That's pushed back a little bit of a ways.
I'm just curious, I mean, 5 years, 10 years, 3 years.
Yeah, so it's like, as Trent just said, it's in priority 3, so.
Years, but definitely not in the 5 years.
Yeah, we have it in the priority 3, which is 15 to 20.
That sounds about right.
When you get your the 2 million gallon reservoir repaired, it would show that under today's demands, you have an surplus, I think is what we're calling it, the surplus of storage. So then that demand or the need for additional storage, you know, it would take 5 to 10 years before it would be required, if the growth happens as projected.
Lots of questions?
Thank you.
Other questions?
It's not.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Now, it's now 7:51 p.m. The public hearing is now open. The quasi-judicial land use hearing, the subject of this hearing is a request for a variance. Subject property is identified on the county assessor's map as lot 1200 on map 1W4DA. The applicant is Nasia Vanilla.
Naisha Vania?
Nasia Vanilla, I really flattered that, I'm really.
That's okay.
Nasia Vanilla. The owner is City of St. Helens. Because quasi-judicial proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities, we will take a few minutes to cover some preliminary matters required to be. Any member of the commission wish to declare an ex parte conflict of interest or wise in this matter. The audience objects to the ability of the commissioner to make a fair decision. Not just slaughter your name. If there are challenges to a member of the commission, the commissioner will have an opportunity to respond. The challenge commissioner. The order of proceedings will be as follows. Require statements, staff report, applicant's presentation. Those in favor of the application, neutral testimony. Those opposed, rebuttal by applicant. Final questions, close of the record, deliberations, and decision. All the statements are required to be commencement of the hearing pursuant to the city code in ORS 197.7635. Following is a list of the applicable substantive criteria for this decision. St. Helens Municipal Code 17.108.0501. Criteria for granting a variance. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria as described, or other criteria of the plan, such as the comprehensive plan or land use regulation, such as that found in the development code, which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing, in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue, and precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yep, it's me today. So we are looking at a variance. It's for a front yard setback. And it is pretty rare, I guess-ish, that the city is the owner of a property that's entertaining a variance. And there's a reason for that. So some background on the properties and where we're at. So this is Old Portland Road right here. This is 10th Street, so we're just south of Old Portland Road on 10th Street. The city owns two 58 by 100 lots, standard lots on 10th Street, right next to each other here. You can see my cursor. The subject property is one of those lots. It's the one closer to Old Portland Road, identified right here. So we own these lots because there used to be a sanitary storm line, and there still is a sanitary storm line, or storm line that runs through the property, but it used to just bisect both down the middle, making them undevelopable. But in 2019, we completed a storm rerouting project that took this line right here and moved it so that it more closely followed the rear property line and then the property line right in between the two lots that we own. There is a pump station right here that has been decommissioned on the other lot, but that is not the subject property for tonight. We're just looking at this one right here that used to be undevelopable for the most part because of a storm line. So now that the storm line's been rerouted, there's a pretty decent building envelope, and at a city council meeting pretty recently, they declared this property surplus, and our applicant is either in the process or has already purchased.
In the process still.
In the process of purchasing, okay. And maybe she can talk about that during her presentation a little bit more. So that's kind of the background. That's why this property is now buildable. It's just because we rerouted this storm line. So the specific request tonight, just go to the next exhibit here. It's kind of hard to get the balance right of being able to read it and also see the whole plan here, but hopefully you can all see that. So this is our 58 by 100 lot. This hatched line is the route of the storm line. So it kind of bisects the property, and that's the main reason for the variance tonight. And then it follows the shared property line. This is the other city-owned lot that's not up for the discussion tonight. So the specific request is this 4 feet of a bedroom highlighted in yellow right here that encroaches in the front 20-foot setback. And so you can kind of see that without this storm infrastructure along the back, there would be no need for the variance request because they could just shift the house backwards and meet the setback requirement for the front yard. But because of this encroachment in the back, that's why they're requesting the 4-foot exception to the front setback. So that's the basic request. As with all variances, we have certain criteria for approval. So I'm going to kind of go through those that are identified in the staff report. So the first criteria for approving a variance is that it's not detrimental to neighbors or other properties within the zoning district. And I noted in the report that because there's an 80-foot right-of-way undeveloped, reducing that front setback from 20 to 16 will still leave 38 feet from the structure of the house or the proposed structure to the roadway. So really visually, there's not a lot of impact when you're on 10th Street if you're just looking at where the house will be placed because there's all this undeveloped right of way, which is common around town. So if the purposes of setbacks is air, light, and space, you've still got that air, light, and space separation between the house and the roadway itself. And there's a good photo of that in the staff report as well, just that extra distance on page 3. So the next criteria we look at, B, is that we need to find that there's special and unique circumstances that warrant a variance in this case. In the applicant's narrative, they talk about how much of the buildable area is encumbered by a storm easement. So it's actually almost 500 square feet of the building envelope is encumbered by a storm easement. And I think that's a pretty unique circumstance to this property, although there are easements on other residential properties across town It's a little bit abnormal that it's not perfectly aligned with the shared property line, which is what we'd like to see. So criteria C talks about that we're maintaining our standards to the greatest extent that's possible. And I noted a few different code exceptions that do allow for variances or setback variances without variances. So the first one, there's a section in our code that allows for certain architectural features like porches, eaves, and other architectural features to overhang into setbacks, and it's provided for 4 feet. So that's kind of our amount here. So I think this request, the point of putting that in there is that this request is in line with other setback variances in our code, 4 feet. And so there's a couple of examples in there in the staff report that, you know, don't require variances.
How is this going to affect a roof line?
So on this bedroom, you can actually see the eave outline proposed. It looks like they're proposing a 1-foot eave. So they'll have a 6-foot setback in the front, and then the eave will encroach into that 16-foot setback. So they would allow projections into setbacks beyond what this variance is requesting. Good question. So our code also allows a 20% reduction in setbacks without a variance for remodeling of homes. And so 20% of 20, 4 feet, so 16, it's just in line with other code exceptions. So it's not an unreasonable request to reduce the setback by 4 feet. So there's just more evidence of that in the report under section C. So it's important to note too that even with this setback variance, there's still ample room to provide 2 on-street parking spaces, which is what we would expect for a single-family dwelling. And that's also why I've put a recommended condition of approval on this as number 2. And it says that the garage or carport shall still meet the 20-foot yard requirement, and that's just to allow for an adequate driveway, off-street parking, basically. And so this garage will still be 20 feet from the front property line.
Clarifying question on placement in terms of where the roadway, actual developed roadway is.
Yeah.
Where's the actual developed street? Is there farther away?
Yeah, so if this is what gets built, the roadway itself will be 38 feet from the front of this bedroom. Yeah, quite the distance.
One thing to note on that question, 10th Street is unique. So a lot of times on this side of town, we have an 80-foot right of way. The classic old school right of way. 10th is 90.
It's on here, I was thinking something was in there.
I thought it was a misprint.
You're right, Jacob.
You said
I
80.
said 80, just thinking, but it is the
Oh.
one roadway that.
Yeah, it's even wider than our common, you got I-5 right there.
Truly, that's how wide US 30 right of way is. I think it's 93. So you're almost up there.
Don't worry, we won't build I-5 there.
Thank you.
Not in the transportation master.
Well, I just wanted to get
St. Helens.
some context of that space from the garage structure down the street.
65.
And just one note to kind of follow the line of your question, Sheila. They would be allowed to have 4-foot projections as allowed by the code. There's rules to the projections that are allowed within that front setback. So even if we grant the 16-foot front setback, they can project into that required yard as the code allows, not with just anything. There's certain architectural features like eaves that can project. And then there's also the limitation of provided it's not more than 3 feet. So there's still a 3-foot protection between all property lines with structures. So I just wanted to point that out. So D and E, you know, this issue is not self-imposed. That's always a requirement we have to have for variance. They didn't put the storm line there. Existing and natural systems will not be adversely affected. You know, they're gonna be required to have a storm connection to this storm line for all their stormwater. There's no evidence that this would cause a natural or adverse effect to the environment by approving this variance. So those were my thoughts. The applicant did have a pretty lengthy narrative, so do you want to open it up for the applicant's presentation?
Yes, if you're done, if you have any other questions of staff? Hey.
Absolutely. My name is Naisha Pania. Thank you again, everyone, for your time this evening. I appreciate it. I am the applicant of the project and just wanted to say very briefly, because it's already so, I think, well put by Jenny, that it is asking for a diminished area for, I guess, the area that is impacted. There's about 481 square feet that is impacted that would normally be buildable. And then we're asking for a total of 54 square feet to shove that building footprint forward and get that extra room in there to construct this. We did try and actually minimize the building footprint and the plan for the building by actually changing what the builder had originally basically put together for the structure. Had like a front porch that projected off of that building. And we actually turned that around and made that a covered entryway that recessed into the building versus projected forward. So we are making every effort on our part to ensure that we minimize that impact into the front setback. And then I think that was basically all I wanted to say, but other than that, just ask if there's any questions about what we in the narrative or
We talked about the kind of the intrusion of the potential back.
Oh.
You are,
if you scroll down, I think a little, is that what you're talking about?
yeah.
Oh, so that was just,
How about that? Jenny?
Nope, I didn't. Well, I mean, I think
that was just kind of the I guess the inverse of the other exhibit, showing that we would still meet the setback requirements, even if that stormwater easement basically wasn't there. It's just to show basically that yellow highlighted area is the area that would be permittable by code, but because that stormwater easement is there, that's what's forcing us forward on the lot.
Oh, okay, so you're saying if everything was positioned farther back, it would look like that?
Yes, yep,
Oh,
and still
okay.
meet and still meet the rear
Okay, I
yard
didn't-
setback.
so this is meeting the front setback. This wouldn't need a variance.
I get you.
However.
So that
it-
back portion is 4 feet,
the back.
the ADU where it's yellow. So we're moving it forward to get that 4 feet.
Oh, it results in a front setback reduction of 4 feet. This is not necessarily a 4 because it's diagonal, but
No, but what
Yeah, I
I'm
get
saying
it.
is to get that into the,
Okay,
yeah,
thank you, I didn't understand that, thought that was set down.
Yeah, that's not what we're proposing, but I just wanted to put that in there as a further explanation to show that it fits. The footprint would fit. We're not asking for increased, I guess, lot coverage or anything because of the shift necessarily.
I want to make a point of clarification. The easement doesn't exist yet. But we will need to reserve it as part of the building permit process. But we've communicated them about what kind of easement we need, 15 foot on center, and that's what's reflected here. I just want to make sure that's clear.
You didn't need easement on the city property.
Yeah, we don't grant an easement to ourselves.
it's under city ownership now, so there isn't one. Yep,
didn't that state that in here?
it did.
I thought that I read that.
I just didn't mention it in my report, but it is in the staff.
It's in the staff report.
Questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who would like to testify or give testimony in support of the application?
We have Zoom folks, so let me just give them the opportunity really quickly too.
We'll also be asking for neutral testimony and testimony in opposition next.
I'm not seeing anybody raise their hand or communicate with me, so I think we can close the hearing.
So no one for neutral testimony or opposition. Yeah. State your name.
Brady Brian. I own the property at 495 South 10th Street, which is directly across from this property. We've owned that property since 1976. Frankly, I don't think the lot's buildable and should have remained in city ownership. But means that they are intent on selling it, and I understand why, because they want to have increased housing. I think the neighborhood doesn't, I don't think there should be a setback allowed for it. I mean, the point of that lot was, both of those lots was for drainage. And there, prior to improvements by the city, that area used to flood every single year. We would spend most of the winter times with literally that whole entire area underwater. The city has finally, after about 30 years, put in a drainage. It took them about 30 years, and so now it drains, and so it's not nearly as bad as it used to be, including water almost coming up into the garage. But that has been fixed. But I think that, my feeling always was that this area was needed by the city for a pumping and a draining. And when they built their pumping and draining, they built it sort of to assume that there was not going to be housing there. And to me, that's still the case. And it's like, well, I mean, I guess if you can redo the drain and fit it so it can, but then clearly they can't because you need a variance. And to me, my issue would be, don't allow the variance. And if that means you can't have a house, then so be it. That means it's not a place for a house. Thank you.
And actually have Ramon, if you like.
So, just to address the opposition's point about the flooding and the stormwater, we'll still be required to meet all drainage requirements and tie into that storm pipe. So our footprint cannot technically modify any of basically the hydrology of the site as it exists today. So we have to actually make sure that any increase in water that happens because of that development gets tied into the stormwater pipe and drains out that way. So we shouldn't see any impact to the neighbors or any of the surrounding properties because of the increased development pattern. Sorry.
Do you have any concern about your house being flooded?
No, I think we can address that when we go to develop the site.
You address the comment that we don't allow this variance, it would make your lot unbuildable.
I think it certainly is not going to be unbuildable. It might vary the footprint of the building, but it doesn't make it unbuildable.
How much time, it sounds like you've been working with the developer about this design.
Builder, yeah. We've put in a significant amount of time to ensure that we, like I said, modify the front portion of the building to ensure that we, encroach as little as possible into the front setback with our roof line and our building footprint. And actually, you're being charged more to make that accommodation with our building plan.
Questions of the applicant?
And we have, I should say really quickly, we have actually put in some time with respect to some site planning and grading planning for it. Just to make you guys aware, so that you do see that it does actually impact a little bit what we've spent time in terms of spending fees, developing and looking at those grading studies.
I have one more question. Any exploration with staff of getting for the city to get a variance rather than whatever feet on center, that there's some shift in the easement. So you don't need a variance. We'll give a variance to the city on its storm drain easement.
I'm sorry, I don't know if I followed the question.
I think he's asking if you ask the city to skew the easement to one side such that the utility is still within, but not necessarily centered.
Right, exactly. Then they wouldn't need the variance at all. We would just move the city would just move its access to, but I don't know how important it is to have those things in the center.
I suppose you would probably have to ask that of Sharon Duro and engineering, but I think the second slide shows that there's probably about 5-ish maybe feet from the footprint to the line. So you could probably still get back in there with a backhoe if you needed to.
It's behind you.
Behind is another property and the sewer line. Residential backyard with like zoning.
There's that picture with the fence. Isn't that the neighbor Isn't that the neighbor behind?
That would be from the street looking back into the lot, I believe.
That's the house, that's what's behind the.
Yes.
You can't see the eye.
The lot's right here.
I don't have any questions.
Thank you.
Any questions of staff? We no further questions to the question, no further responses from staff. The public record is closed. This matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral decision. What I didn't see in is the recommendations.
So we have 3 conditions. So
It's not here. They're not here.
Yes.
staff report in their packet.
I didn't get it.
So we just have what you said, the municipal code and the response.
It's moving it up there, I think.
Does it say different name?
No, the full packet's online. Yeah, and
Whenever I had it in the packet folder is what I printed.
I don't know.
but they got a staff report, correct?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, it's on the last page of the staff report. Do you not have copies of the staff report? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
I do not, I know I don't,
Okay, weird.
because I didn't for it this morning. And
This is actually there.
That's, her report is great. I mean, I thought it was yours. You changed your format.
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So the recommended conditions are, so staff recommends approval with these 3 conditions. One is just the validity of time. So they have to execute on this variance within a certain period of time, otherwise it's moot. Second is that the garage or the carport shall still meet the 20-foot yard requirement, and that's also to help with the off-street parking. They'll still have to provide 2 off-street parking spaces. And then the last one is just our catch-all. This is our catch-all condition that we have on all of our variances, and that's just that they have to comply with the law. So 3 standard conditions.
Need more questions?
I just want to make sure we have opposition. And, whatever decision we make, I want to make sure that procedurally. So I want to make sure that staff is comfortable that if we because I guess there was the staff recommendation wasn't in the packet, if we should
It was
postpone the
in the
hearing.
packet, I
It
think
was.
you just didn't get a hard copy, so it was notified to the public, and I don't know why our website, when I looked, and you said it was down, was working, so I don't know, were you not able to get it?
It's currently working too, I just.
Yeah.
No, because it was an error message.
I was able to pull it up, during the meeting when you were mentioning it,
Because I tried it earlier, it was giving the same message.
And I'm pulling it up right now and it's.
I don't know if it's a browser issue, but I am not experiencing the error.
But I did get it in the PDF that you said.
Okay, so you were able to pull it up and,
After Patrick mentioned it, I tried it on my phone and that does download the whole packet. But the individual links.
okay. Yeah, I'll have to check with Kathy and Lisa too to see if they've gotten other complaints. But it is in the packet online, it was notified correctly, we did proper notice. I think it was just an oversight. Sounds like.
You have to be able to positively look at each criterion and find that it is met.
Which, we can go through right now.
You have a body of work in the packet.
I remember
Yeah.
seeing that online, when I reviewed it online, and there's.
We've got all that, but. No, I
Still
I don't know
going
what
through
the-
each one here.
Yeah, so this is about finding that the variance is not detrimental to surrounding neighbors, which I think this is what you heard testimony about tonight. My comment here is that there's still, so here's the property pin, it was staked out when I took these site photos. This is the distance between the front property line and the developed roadway right here. This is an additional 16 feet before the structure. So this is just the front property line. So you've got the 16 feet plus this additional undeveloped right of way and then the roadway. So this is what staff thought about how you could make a finding that you're not detrimental to neighbors. You've still got so much space. And then B, special and unique circumstances. This is where we talked about how much of the buildable area is impacted by the storm easement. So I think that that's an adequate, unique circumstance.
Let's debate one at a time. Let's start with 17A, or the A criteria.
And if we're gonna do this, the explanation criteria is paraphrasing the criterion in this statute, so if we're gonna do this, we need to look at the entire language.
So A, can you guys read that? Should I make it bigger?
Yeah, make it bigger, I can't read it.
All right, so there's the full section of the code.
I don't, in my opinion, I don't see how this small moving of this property forward based upon the amount of room is at variance. Not in, I don't see how it'd be detrimental to the overall purposes of the code, or conflict with the policies, the comprehensive. See how this would conflict with that at all.
That's why I was gonna make a motion to approve it as recommended.
Okay, then,
So B, I think, is a pretty easy one. This is a special circumstance. You have a
Yeah.
storm line.
right, and I think that B looks like it's applicable as well, and it wasn't made by the applicant.
Yeah.
No,
So C is all about you're maintaining the code to the greatest extent possible. You heard some testimony today about how they did alter the porch. Staff talked about other code exceptions that are allowed without variances for approximately 4 feet of encroachments. And so I think that the number that they're asking for is numerically consistent with other code exceptions. And so that was my take on C.
The other component of C is that it's not a use variance and they're not asking for a marijuana retail center, they're asking for a dwelling.
It is consistent with the zoning.
Seems reasonable to make this reasonably possible, so I think it's reasonable. it's 5 feet we're talking about, where there's
Four.
4 feet,
Four.
4 feet.
Even less. So D is all about adverse impacts to drainage systems, traffic, parks, natural systems. There's no evidence that a 4-foot front setback variance would impact our drainage or any of the other systems.
Agreed.
Yeah. Is there any other discussion?
I think to answer Brady's, objection would be, it started with the city first, because they wanted to put the lot up for sale. It's a residential lot for sale, so that's where the objection should have started with the city council.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty minimal thing in light of I know there were some concerns expressed about our
Right.
commission sometimes going with the recommendations of staff, but I think this is a very minimal variance being requested in order to accommodate, frankly, the city and the city's need for an easement to access something, and we're talking about 4 feet, in an area that can accommodate.
We're not making a decision whether the house will be built, only extension of 4 feet into the front.
Right.
That's our decision.
We'll make a motion that we accept the recommendation of the planning commission.
All in favor?
Aye.
I need to sign. Just a recommendation.
I'll make a motion for signature.
Second,
Aye.
and now I favor.
Aye.
Last thing to say. Final written decision of the planning commission may be appealed to the city council. The notice of decision will be mailed to all persons who testified or submit comments, and the appeal deadline will be included in the notice.
If you sign in, Brady, with your address, we'll email you a copy of the decision if you want it. And it'll talk about the appeal process.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
We're going to the next thing. Take a poll.
Stop it, guys.
Well, I looked for it. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's the same as all of them, so what they.
Well, it's weird because I scanned in the report for the copy, and it's scanned in correctly on mine.
It's funny.
It comes to the, but
No, I'll go back and listen to it.
Listen to it.
Twice. One motion that was, which is why I only put one in there. I'll go back.
The rest of it was an A.
She didn't say anything, so that was.
Yeah.
No, I don't think she did.
Right, so that would be.
I'll hold on to
Take her
this.
off.
Thanks, Steve. How about Winkle?
so
Shit.
now I know where you live.
No.
I don't know.
Huh?
I don't know where to live. I've owned the house.
Oh, you own, okay,
I rent it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been a rental for 20 years.
Right.
It happens.
Yeah, I walk through there a lot, that area with my dog.
He used to live there.
Did you?
In the.
But you still live down in,
It says.
do you still live, no, you live up,
Clark. I wouldn't have found it.
along the creek, is that the one? you live? Oh, okay, I walk up there too. I like that street actually, I lived a long time before.
It's awful.
It's pretty cool as hell. You want that one too here?
No.
Take that one home.
No.
Yeah, I'm gonna press the rest of the meeting.
No.
All right, are we ready?
Yeah.
You announce it? That we've moved on
We moved on.
to the,
The outbreak is done.
Okay.
Yeah, presentation, Jen.
yeah, it's C, preferred alternatives for Gray Cliffs Park. We do have some people on Zoom still, so I just want to make sure that we're announcing the agenda, you know, I know there's not a lot of people in the room, but so let me back up. So this was a presentation that was prepared for or by the Oregon State Marine Board. You'll see their logo in the corner. And Gray Cliffs Park in the Parks and Trails Master Plan has a recommended in-water facility for fishing. And it is currently a boat launch park. You can launch your kayak from Gray Cliffs off the shore. And so this project is really from that 2015 master plan effort. And to pursue that in-water facility, Oregon State Marine Board offers a technical assistance program where they will help design and permit a facility for at no cost to the city. And so we started that process, and this presentation was prepared for by them. I am no expert in water facility permitting or design. So if there are like really detailed questions, I might just have to punt questions to them. But I know the Planning Commission has been interested in this. Russ has brought it up. And so I just wanted to give the commission an opportunity to comment on the proposed design. If you know you have a kayak, any of you, or have fished in the area, I'd love to hear your feedback. Do you have kayaks, any of you?
4 of them.
Do you? Okay, great. And
Well done.
do you have the kayaks?
Two.
You do. Great, awesome. Okay, you guys are the crowd that I want to hear from.
And a lot of fishing.
So this in-water facility is for two main users, paddlecraft users for launching and fishing. So it's a fishing pier and a paddlecraft launch. So we're gonna talk about the different design alternatives as we move along. But first there's some existing condition slides and things like that.
So I do have to say that I was part of a committee, which.
Yeah, no, I was gonna mention it. So, so the purpose of this is to gather from the Planning Commission, but we've also met with the Parks Commission yesterday and got their feedback on the same presentation. And then prior to that, in March, I convened a group of stakeholders. So Brad from the St. Helens Marina was there, Patrick was there, the mayor was there, Dan was there as a kayaker and also a permitting expert for in-water facilities, or DSL expert. And then this is also going to be presented at a May 4th public forum. So city council, the general public will come and look at this presentation and provide feedback too. So this isn't the end. After we collect all this feedback, the Marine Board will take that and then move forward with a preferred alternative and assist us with a 2-year probably process to design and permit the facility. So ultimately this will probably be grant funded. The Marine Board also has a grant program and they're notorious for funding the projects they've assisted designing and permitting. So that's the life cycle of the whole project. So anyways, that's
I
back.
just got to say that when I went into the meeting, I had a choice that I picked, and that's really the one I wanted. At the end of the meeting, I was supportive of the one I possibly didn't want to begin with. Help guide you to why.
Yeah, I'd love, feel free to chime in, Dan. This is not a formal thing, so yeah, the end result is not a motion or recommendation or anything. I'm just hearing feedback, so. So Gray Cliffs Park, here's a good aerial of the park itself. I wanted to point out a couple things. So in 2019, we got an Oregon Parks and Rec grant to install this beautiful new restroom facility where my cursor is. And then we also paved and striped the parking lot. And this area here is a loading zone for bringing paddlecraft launching on the shoreline. It's gravel, not the best way to launch, but some people do prefer it. Maybe one day it'll be sand. maybe.
Then you've been working on that for a while.
Yeah, and then here's kind of a shot looking up this bank here of the park. So a couple other things on here. The Marine Board did a survey and they put a couple numbers up here. I just want to point out two of them. So MLLW is mean low water. That's at 6.3 feet in elevation. And then the other one is this extreme high, you know, that's abnormally high, but it's 20.3, and then the flood of 96 was 27.3. So you can kind of see the range of elevation that the river is that this in-water facility has to work with. It's a pretty big range. So that'll impact the slope of the ramp, ADA accessibility, you know, all the things that impacts quite a bit. So just to keep that in mind. And then here, it's just the goal, we talked about this, is to have a paddle dock, launch, and fishing pier that are both accessible and permittable. So that's the kind of goal of this project. So I threw this in to show the proximity to the marina. So here's the parking lot in yellow here. The area we're gonna look for this facility is right where I'm drawing this circle. So you can kind of see the extent. It's not as far out as the marina, but it is pretty far out into the water, the facility that we're looking at. And that's driven primarily due to permitting. The Marine Board said that the median low water line, this number, they want to be 20 feet out further from that line of elevation to permit the facility. So you'll see that on the drawings. But yeah, it's all within here.
They want at least 20 feet.
Yes. Yeah.
Where the facility would be, not necessarily
Oh,
horizontal
distance.
extent,
Yes.
but depth.
No, thank you, Dan. Yeah, you're right.
That has to do with the National Fisheries Service concern about shallow water habitat for the inshore fish. Protecting that shallow water habitat.
So this slide, man, there's a lot of permits to get, and man, there's a lot of consultation with a lot of agencies for in-water facilities. This is basically the full Monty of permitting. And this is actually why they have a technical assistance program, because they do these facilities across the state. They know all the right people, they're the experts on this stuff.
Where's Brad's permitted line? Is that the piling or is he go beyond that?
So these are the pilings, these pink dots. So he's way beyond. You see the pink?
No, but I mean, downriver. Does he go further downriver at all with his lease?
Oh, I'm not sure. I don't know what his lease.
He was talking about putting more docks in down there
Oh, okay.
at one point in time, so I don't know.
Do you mean, does his lease extend in front of the park here?
Correct.
Yeah.
No, we actually maintain a commercial moorage in this area with DSL now. Is that right? Yeah, okay. Not you, but other department.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think John Walsh was thoughtful about not removing these pilings because you can use them as permittable mitigation. So if you want to add new, you can take the old ones out and place the new ones easier. So these are actually really valuable pieces of mitigation for permitting.
Likely would be pulled as a result of this project for mitigation.
Yeah, and you'll see on the three concepts that are in here, some of them are pretty close to some of the designs, so we would have a priority to remove the ones that might impede the route of travel.
Maybe some that are a little water most of the time that would be important to get up to.
But
I
you can still
have a
use
note
those
on
as
this.
mitigation. You're counting one, right?
Jenny,
Yeah.
if we're gonna remove some of those pilings as I just got, that it's actually bird habitat. So I've seen ospreys nesting on top of the pilings and
Pretty sure these agencies would know.
That's the
know
reason,
about that.
that's the reason why they want to take them out, because they're predatory for endangered. Yeah. So, that's the one that, yeah.
They're beautiful and watch, anyway.
So it's ecosystem versus what? A terrestrial person.
It was just provided more space for predators to pick off the.
Pick off the things that can barely survive.
Especially cormorants.
Osprey aren't endangered.
No, they are not. They're protected.
Yeah, still just jot it down because I think it is, I don't know how much an osprey eats or whatever. But can we leave a filing for an osprey?
Oh, yeah, no, taking these out is costly, we would not remove more than what was required by the agency.
Put a plaque on one with his name.
I know.
Osprey Landing.
Steve's Osprey Landing.
The filings that go to facing on there will have caps on them so birds cannot land.
Right, that's what I see, and that's what I noticed, so that's why I'm bringing it up.
Sure.
Unrelated to all of this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Similar bird caps.
Osprey and salmon.
I've been wondering what they were called.
Get on with it.
Enemy.
Yeah, let's go.
People part.
Okay, so all of the designs have a couple common features. The first is accessible routes. We want this to be ADA accessible. The second is a double gangway. So a double gangway is what it sounds like. It's two components. So in this picture, this is kind of the ramp, and then there's a secondary feature where beyond these pilings. So I'll point that out on the next slide. And then the dock design and features. So there's fishing docks. This is an example of a fishing dock. We would lower the railing in some areas so that you can wheelchair up and fish off of docks. So they make ADA accessible railing for fishing off of. And then another common feature is light penetration. So you notice this has the grating every so often that allows light to reach the water. This is for permitting purposes as well. And it's what Dan talked about. You've got endangered salmon. You don't want to create so much dark shadows that there's areas for predators to take out the salmon. And so light penetrating decking is important for permitting purposes.
So I was hacked a little bit because I'm picking it apart a little bit. I was in a pre-application meeting with an improvement at the Sykes Bay Marina just last week. And we want to do a double 12-foot wide gangway down for access to paddlecraft, to be able to pass each other and so forth. Do you know how wide this gangway is?
Well, I know it's at least 10 in the actual dock itself, but the gangway down I thought was 5.
So, and Natural Fisheries Service had a real problem with that.
Oh, interesting. That it was 5, that
It
they
was 12.
12 wide.
It would fit slopes, so.
Interesting. Okay.
When you get down to the dock, are the fishing people, kayak people will be on the same dock?
No, we haven't gotten to that yet. It's coming up. All of this is to show images to like the 2D design so that you have an idea of what these features are.
And there was the point of the Sykes Bay Marina dock was to widen it. So there was less interference. And I mean, I've pulled kayaks up on my cart up there, and people have to just wait for you to get up the ramp before they go.
Yeah, that's a
If
bummer.
you lengthen these things way out there, that would be, a little pain in the butt.
Permitting agencies are the king, right?
So
How wide do you think it should be ideally?
It doesn't matter what he thinks. Because
Well,
it has to be permittable,
yeah,
Steve.
so I think
That's the point.
I think it has to be 6 or 8 feet. I don't remember exactly for a commercial one, but residential 6 feet.
If the docks are separate, why not separate walkways for each one?
Well, they're not separate, so.
Yeah, so let's continue. I think you're digressing a little bit before I can even talk about the designs.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So I just want to keep this picture in mind in the upper right. It's not the best picture of it, but there's a later picture. This is what the actual kayak launch looks like. I know you can't really see it very well, but this is the feature that is, we're calling it accessible kayak launch ramp. So there's a better photo I'll show you. So this is the point of this image is not the upper area. There's better images that show that. The point of this is the side profile. So this is showing the double gangway feature. So the first portion is stationary here, and then the second portion goes up and down with the elevation of the river. So obviously this virtually flat one would be when the river is at its highest. There's virtually no slope to get to the dock facility. When it's at its lowest in the summer, you're gonna have a slope down to get to the facility. And then the ground.
Interesting thing about the stationary, and they're not stationary, for real stream flood, they also float up
Yeah, stationary for the purposes of that they're not
most of the time.
doing
Most of
this.
the time they're stationary.
Yeah, they're not, yes.
Not
And
those.
if it's straight up or at flood,
So that's where like.
We're in trouble.
Um,
27
When the
feet.
flood, how you get to it.
so they did say that the top of these is 6 feet higher than what the flood of 96 was. So that these they wouldn't just float right off the top. That was a question we brought up in the stakeholder meeting.
Well, the 96 flood, they had to have tugboats.
Yep.
And as they floated over.
That's right.
Yeah.
Go catch them.
So what else I wanted to point out on the side profile too is that you can actually cut, so if you're launching out here and you want to go around, you can actually swim underneath this secondary portion. So you don't have to go out into the channel area, the river portion. You can stay closer inland and get around. So I just wanted to point that out.
Swim pushing your kayak under.
Yeah.
I got it, I'm following you, go for it.
So, since we're already kind of late, I don't want to go through each one of these and like critique every component. I think I just want to talk about the preferred alternative and why we ended up there. So I'm just going to go to concept 3, and then we can refer back to these if we need to. This also has the best photo of the actual ramp facility itself. So you can see these bars that are submerged in water so that you can actually kind of ramp up onto them when you're entering or exiting the river. And then this metal thing kind of slides out so you can roll up in your wheelchair and kind of transition into the kayak a little bit easier because these slide in and out. This facility is in Westport, Oregon. The Marine Board designed that facility. It's been installed. You can actually go visit it if you want. They just did a brand new boat dock. It's a whole big project in Westport. This was just one component of it. But the Marine Board's first test of this design was there, and it's working really well. And so they want to implement another one here. So let's talk about the concept. So here's the edge of the parking lot here. So the dock itself will actually come off in the loading zone area. So this is currently the gravel area where shoreline launchers could still launch. This will not replace the shoreline launching. So if there's a preference, you can still launch there. So the first gangway is 80 feet long in this concept, and then the second one is 120 feet long. So total, you're 200 feet in length, which is pretty long to carry your kayak. It's a trek, and that was talked about at the Parks and Rec Commission about, well, what if we just shorten the ramp? Well, the shorter it is, the higher slope you've got. So with this length, we can achieve an under 8% slope, which is great. That's a really good achievable ADA accessible slope. The shorter you make it, one of these concepts has it at 100 total, reduces it by 20 feet, and it increases the slope by 12%. So, it increases it to 12%, which is substantial. So I think the overall preference is to have the longer double gangway so that the slope is less. So that's the first component.
But 12% still meets ADA.
For these types of facilities, it does, yes. The Marine Board has said that we're trying to exceed ADA requirements because that slope is so steep, even just for families to get down with wheeling kayaks or hauling kayaks. So the other components, so this is the fishing side. Let me zoom in a little bit. So it has the pillars on the shore side of the launch. So you would go, you'd walk out here and you'd fish off the side here. Some of these concepts had the fishing side on the south side, and that was not the preference just because of the way the water flows. You'd want your lines to be going northward. You don't want them to conflict with the kayakers. So that's the fishing component. And then this is the orientation of the ramp. This is what we spent a lot of the stakeholder meeting talking about, is how we actually orient the ramp in relation to water flow and wind. And so ultimately this was the preference. There was a tweak that we made during that meeting, which is to flip this transition dock with the actual ramp. So this ramp would move here and the transition zone would move on the outside, and that would help have some wind break, current break, when you're getting in and out of that ramp facility. What else to say here? This ramp is actually long enough to fit 2 kayaks. So if you have a family, you can have 2 people kind of getting in and out at the same time. So that was something the committee talked about and appreciated. Am I missing anything, Dan?
No, just a little bit more detail about the orientation.
Yeah, we did talk about how this could be angled slightly, so if you wanted it to be more, see how this one's kind of like tweaked? This is not the preference, just because it's got the fishing on the south side, but it does come out at an angle from the
Actually,
shore.
we're considering angling
Yeah,
farther upstream, the,
right,
no, none of the concepts show that.
right.
So that the, going down to the preferred one, so the fishing pier would be even a little bit more of an angle.
Like this direction,
No,
the other way,
the other way,
yeah. So bringing this facility down a
just a
little.
little bit more. The point being, as the wind blows, maybe like it does every summer upstream, you get that break of the dock, the fishing dock, and that angle, it's already an angle. When you're coming in from Sand Island, you get all that wind break from the kayak, because the wind is going to be much more effective than the current. At least with the current, where there is a current, it's lined up with the ramp to put your kayak in if you're in the current. Not fighting the wind, but you're lined up. Well, I'm gonna try to get in some of it. And then the other thing is, what I was concerned about was having this initially, having the paddle dock on this side, and what people expecting to get out was in the beach side. This side. But I didn't factor in the wind initially. So they're anticipating that you get out, you get it, if you want to go on the beach launch, you go under this ramp and out. So you're not interfering with the fishermen. There's no conflict with the fishermen because you're going under the ramp and towards Sand Island or wherever you want to go.
There was talk too about how this orientation for fishing gets you out into deeper water, which is the preference.
Right, if it's turned a little bit more, it'd be better.
Right. And then this just shows another picture of that ramp from the other side. So you can see the arm bars to kind of help you get in and out. But that's what I had. It's kind of a lot to take in, so I get that. If you have comments later, just let me know. We're still getting feedback up until May, so.
Do you have anybody on the line that wants to provide feedback? Anybody that's on Zoom? Anybody there?
This wasn't totally intended for the public, just, it was intended for you guys to review it. If they can come to the forum. That's a public hearing. I mean, I could ask, but yeah. This was for you guys.
I can see these kind of, well, like this Caprice Bay Marina, there's one that Next Adventure has. Or the one at Seaside. You say them?
I think
Pretty slick.
Yeah, I need that.
I actually asked the Marine Board if they could have higher bars on each side. And they said they could, either side of the bench.
I can see that getting very busy. You might want to put some rails on the other side of the dock too. So if someone just wanted to throw it in the water and get in there, then the backlog because you've got two that are gonna get their gear together, it takes time, get your kid in, put your dog in.
It's a very low dock already, so a lot of people are gonna launch off the side.
Yeah,
I don't have to launch after that, I can launch off the side.
because I've been at Scappoose where you launch off the regular dock and I'm just a whale.
Yeah.
Walking on the
Yeah.
dock.
Well, that's what that's what this prevents.
Yeah.
It's much easier, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, we talked a lot about how it might be difficult to like get your nose into this ramp, and Brad asked, can you like do a Y shape at the entrance, so it's a little wider?
I think you've got so much control of that.
Yeah,
The wind and current, you can really, especially if you go in summertime, you can go in with the wind.
Into the wind.
No,
Into the wind, it's coming from the north.
So that's perfect going into the wind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's sheltered because of all that break.
Right.
How long is the dock? Is it 80 feet?
no, it's
Kayak
200,
dock?
oh, the kayak portion.
Kayak.
It says that, so this is 30, so the length of the ramp, this is 30.
So a couple things. When I've been to Scappoose Bay, I just seen people use their kayaks as they take up a lot of space. Some of these kayaks are like 10 feet long, 12 feet long, and so
16 and a half.
and there seems to be some
My wife's.
the real estates, people come in, they try and get their kayaks out, and you have often a lot of people trying to move their kayaks at the same time in and out.
Yeah.
I don't know if the kayak dock could be bigger, or if there could even be another one of those launch ramp things. Just because I see Scappoose Bay already kind of being a very congested kayak.
Yeah, it's a
Trying to
rental.
get in and
It's
out
a
of it.
rental place too. Yeah, they have it right, the paddling center's right there. So one thing I just would say to that is the Marine Board used to do these facilities where this portion was only 5 feet wide. And they realized that when you're queuing, there's no way to pass. So if you're a fisherman and you're coming down and you've got a line of kayaks along here waiting to use the ramp, you can't pass. And so they were intentional about making sure this is at least 10 feet wide along here. So it widens out from the ramp itself. So the gangways are 5 and then it widens to 10. So that's wide enough that you can pass.
So I wonder if it would be flipping the thing to the middle, the actual ramp. What do you call this thing? The easy access kayak thing.
Launch.
That could you add another, in future, an add-on, another dock?
Like just another one of these transition
Yeah,
zones.
seems like there'd be a room to the left. Before the poles, before the pilot. Share it here. So this is over here, and this kind of thing here, and another one over here.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, are they modular? Can you
Yeah, sure seems like they would
install
be.
a larger one, yeah.
Larger, we're gonna already, this would be one on each side.
So Steve, I think I was thinking more about your question about scale. And I think about the paddling center and how big that parking lot is and how big of a facility it is. And then I think about our 10 parking space lot. I think this is the right scale for this park. And I like that Dan is thinking ahead, and maybe you could add on to it in the future. Maybe if we provided more parking.
The prices.
Yeah, exactly. These in-water facilities are costly for sure. So it's a good question. I like that you're thinking ahead.
Well, I sat on the parks meeting too, and there was some discussion about extra parking. And then I had some discussions with some people in the public and talked about the potential for this ramp. People are very interested in it. There were some questions about, will there be kayak rentals? Will there be kayak storage? And so this has the potential of being boatless and thinking, is 30 feet enough? And you're trying to get 3 or 4 14-foot kayaks in, and is that gonna be big enough, and is it gonna facilitate, the need? So we aren't running into, 2 years we're in and we're running into backup queues and things like that, so.
Yeah, I mean, the city has no plans to start running them out of the park, the public park, but
Yeah.
yeah, I could see it building more kayakers in the city for sure. If you add more facilities, more people are gonna go out and buy kayaks to use it, right?
Right.
That's
And
how it works, yeah.
isn't the
When
the Riverwalk, the south end.
Yep.
Would be another
Right.
put in place.
Something for people to do, and they go down and maybe, I'm just saying that this is a real,
And more metro.
I think it may be bigger than people are thinking eventually. And I think that the kayak, what I see in Scappoose Bay is just really a lot of, a lot of folks
Yeah,
doing it.
Yeah, it's a regional draw. People drive in from Portland to use Scappoose Bay paddling. Yeah.
Well, next promotes it that way, because
If Scappoose Bay is too busy, they'll go on up to this one.
Yeah, I mean, the locals will know about this spot, right?
I'm concerned about the narrowness of the ramp going down there. It's gonna be a one kayak, one wide ramp.
Yeah.
And the Caboose Bay, they're finding that to be a problem, where they're trying to do a wider ramp.
Right.
And I don't want a built-in obsolescence that we got this super long thing. Like, oh man, someone's starting out of the same 200 feet away.
You're gonna wait for a while they're walking up.
In the pre-application meeting with the Caboose Bay, I said, well, is it possible to have like a wide spot in the middle for a waiting spot? And maybe we could. So
Passing lane.
yeah, just a passing spot. So if someone's coming along and they get stuck and I go, whoa, I don't want to go all the way back. I could just go into this little notch out. So maybe the side view again. Where it's, someone on this.
Right.
It's not movable. There's so much movable. You just ask a question enough to get a body off of the way, so the kayaker can go by. I think it'll make it much more usable.
Yeah.
I agree
It's
with
so long.
Yeah.
I think it's a bigger problem because it's so long.
Yeah. And the Parks and Rec echoed that too. It's just like, that's a long ramp to walk. And I said, but there's a loading zone in the parking lot. At least you have that.
Yeah, so
No,
one thing Scappoose Bay is gonna do is they're gonna make a little deck, or potentially they could make a deck. A wider loading zone, preparing zones, you get your kayak stuff all together before you go down. So you're not plugging up down at the water to get your kayak loaded with all your gear or whatever. So you might think about an alternative to making a bigger area down there is have a bigger setup area, a wider get ready area.
Yeah, and fortunately in the park, there's kind of that grassy, there's a grassy area where people picnic currently all along here too.
Yeah, we don't have the problem of the parking and the turning that they have there. We have enough space, but maybe you have it out with their.
Kind of like a staging area.
Yeah.
No, that's good feedback.
Just to think about it. I mean, we
Who
may have
knows?
it, we don't have any problem with it.
Yeah, I don't know if like a passing lane is even a permittable thing. As you noted, they got shot down trying to make a wider ramp, but it doesn't hurt to ask.
This is only 5 feet wide and they were trying to do a 12-foot wide.
Right, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So maybe just a smaller area platform, yeah. Okay.
Also on drafting it, when it goes, before it goes into permit, if you could show an alternate, not an alternate, but an additional kayak launch.
Oh, like.
If that's dotted in there, then it's already passed, so down the road, you could always put it in without permitting all over again.
It's as a side note of permitting issues, National Fisheries Service was not super happy about the dock, fishing dock. Very similar to this, wasn't a fishing dock, it was their launching dock. But, and it's kind of a little nuance, you got this, you have chunk of concrete, and they have the mesh, it's more see-through. And they would like to see 50% of the dock be 60% light penetration. And they had 50% of the dock, 50% light penetration. And they found that if they made the grating bigger, these things are modular, they put it together on site, that they flip over. So it's an engineering thing, they make the grating as big as they can with the concrete. So you get heavy concrete on one side, this light mesh on one side, grating it. If it's too much grating and it flips over or something, there's an issue with.
That's terrifying.
It's not use, it's when they're putting it together. So.
Kalama's got docks, there's nothing but the mesh.
Grading.
The grading, that's all it is, no concrete.
Yeah.
Well, Marine boards always had concrete docks, so this is they moved to anything with light penetration, but.
Yeah, that's what their bread and butter, is just building concrete docks for
Yeah.
years and years. Yeah.
So the point is that you can propose anything. You could propose a 12-foot wide gangway. You could propose concrete. You're just gonna be in a different permitting process. It's gonna be longer.
Yeah.
Maybe potentially formal consultation, so.
And they're our partner in that, so we kind of have to work
Yeah.
within their parameters.
It's not us permitting it.
Exactly. And actually, they may even hire a consultant to do the permitting on their behalf. The Marine Board may not even have the staff or expertise on hand to do that type of permitting.
And that particular meeting was a consultant that was presented.
But it's 9:06. Is there any more feedback on this concept? I definitely jotted down a few ideas. Doesn't hurt to ask. So potentially another one of these just on the other side, kind of
And everything's
shifted.
over, yeah.
Yeah, and then maybe the wider area for passing,
Yeah.
If possible, or even a wider ramp in general. So instead of 5, maybe 6.
That ups the price.
Oh, I'm sure.
We keep to put a passing spot compared to passable.
Yeah. Great.
And that was the thing about, seems like we talked about this in our little committee, that people are gonna go out to this dock just to walk out there to see things, so.
Oh, yeah.
Having didn't we talk about having a white spot out
We
there?
did, yeah. Yeah,
That was where it was, it wasn't the Scaboots, it was the Marine Board,
yeah, it was with us.
and they thought that was not a bad deal. For many people.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, that's a great idea for design, but we'll see.
That's right.
Yeah, no, this is good.
It getting me fixed up, okay. Okay. We're now to this proactive planning commission framework discussion. Put that together, do you present that?
All right, thank you, Dan. So this document that we put together so what I did is at the end of our last meeting, I took what I thought were the salient comments, which then were also noted by Christina in her minutes. But I didn't have those. I just kind of tried to take everybody's ideas and then synthesize them at the beginning on different concerns people had. And then the idea is that we're going to start taking on issues proactively, framework, procedure for the planning commission to take these things on. And this is kind of dovetailing off our discussion at the last meeting. some of the concerns raised were the amount of time the planning commission has to address issues and whether we were open to additional meetings. And so the procedure elements were, at least initially, the commission would retain its current procedures. Basically, we continue work, meet one time a month, and then we would have agenda items be on our agenda that the planning commission is interested to follow. So these are the outline for procedure elements. Then the idea would be that any planning commissioner could request an agenda item to include a proactive matter for the commission to consider, which would be an item, and the commission would then pitch the item to the commission at the public hearing. The commissioner must identify in the presented materials how the item or matter for the commission study, planning, approval, action, proposed legislation, or other is within the jurisdiction of the planning commission, and must identify specifically which item the St. Helens Municipal Code Section 2.08.080 is applicable for the purposes of jurisdiction. So somebody says, I'd like us to study or make a recommendation to the council, some idea, something that involves planning. I put an example here, you could have any example, but the idea would be to then talk to the planning commission, say, okay, I think this is within our jurisdiction because it fits this section of the code. This is why I'd like it to be done. And I think the planning commission should take it up. And then basically, if the planning commission is persuaded that the item is something that it would like to explore, the commission would vote to do so. So we'd have a discussion. Is this something we're interested in looking at? Is this something the city is already working on? Is this something, why do we need this? What benefits? How long will it take us to make a decision? Whatever questions the planning commission would have. Then the planning commission may say to that commissioner, why don't you come back next meeting and refine your proposal? Maybe we put a vote and say we're not interested in it. We're not, because I think we should only take things up that we agree as a body we want to take up, which is one of the things that, one of the concerns that, well, a lot of the concerns that were raised is, well, how do we take things on and what are these ideas and how are they going to get on our agenda? And so it has to be something we agree as a body that can be stated and then cognizable, and we as a body say, yes, we're interested in taking up this item. That's the opening, that's the gatekeeper.
How many approvals do you need for that?
You'd have to go, you'd have to get 4 out of 7 or whatever the quorum is. You would have to get the proper amount of votes. So planning commission would say, we're not interested in this, we don't want to do it. There'd be, discussion, we deliberate. People might say, no, we're not interested in doing this. At least not at this time. Come back in 6 months, talk about it then. But if the planning, if the planning commission isn't interested in the item, there's no need to pursue it and come back and continue to follow its agenda item. Planning commission needs to be
Totally.
right. We have to vote. We're interested in taking this item on, and then we decide, okay, how are we going to do it? So first we say, yes, we're interested in the item. So that's number 3 is kind of the gatekeepers. Are we interested in it? Not interested in it? Maybe we want to look at this later, come back in a month. Why don't you come back and refine your idea a little more, give some feedback to the commissioner. And this is just procedures. And then let's say it is an item we want to explore. How are we going to explore that? Are we going to want to study it? How are we going to want to study it? There should, depending on what it is that we are trying to learn, and what our code says is that when we go to advise the council, our decisions should be based on data. Our decisions should be based on community involvement. So how will we explore this item? How are we going to get data so that when we do make a recommendation to council, it's supported by evidence and there's the opportunity for public input? And that's right. And so we would then decide what do we want to do with this? How do we want to do it? Do we want to study? Do we want to get a survey done? Do we want to invite the public to give us feedback? Whatever it is, there needs to be a method. And then the item would move forward at a pace on the agenda as dictated by the commission. So the commission would decide, okay, we're going to study this. We're going to want this thing studied for X amount of time. Come back in a month. Come back in 2 months. Come back in 3 months. And we're going to put on the agenda then as a item to look at. And then, I guess within this idea is that a lot of the work would be done by subcommittee. So people would say, like Dan had an idea that he was interested, or Sheila did, say, okay, I'm gonna head up a subcommittee. It would be that person's responsibility to come back before the planning commission after meeting in subcommittee, which is one of the public people, so the public to be involved. We get some public stakeholders involved, get some public involved. They come back and say, this is what we found. This is the recommendation of the subcommittee. So we aren't trying to learn about something we're going to make a decision about within the public hearing itself. It's synthesized and brought forward, kind of like things are done now. Staff would need to be involved in some way. We'd have to work staff in. And so there should be at some along way public comment and input, proper notice, public participation. Basically, once an agenda item works its way through our procedures, we would come up with a recommendation to the council. And it could be proposed legislation, it could be recommendations for action by the council. It would be something that the planning commission would bring to the council to help guide the council on policy. So that's kind of the outline on that's as far as we got. So things kicked around, went back and forth, and so basically the discussion points is today's really not a day for agreement. This is just to discuss how should we be a proactive participation? How do we do it? I think it'd be very challenging to have somebody come in within the confines of this meeting and say, hey, today is the day I want to talk about this. What do you guys think? And try and take something on brand new from the hip here that's try and make a decision. I don't think that's the right way to go.
What I hear is a subcommittee, not everybody maybe is interested as another person.
Correct.
So a subcommittee might be 3 or 4 people. And I see it, Dan, kind of like with the kayaks. 2 years ago, if you had decided that you wanted us to look into the possibility of having this Great Cliffs water park, you would start looking at so many people that got kayaks and the utilization and the ADU, the handicap. But Sheila and I don't have a kayak. Actually, I've rented them from Scantleys Bay and my daughter's got at least 10. But, this might not have been our priority. So the 3 of you and maybe Jennifer wanted to go look into it.
Non-quorum.
Yeah, but bringing it back.
So
We can have that as a non-quorum, 4 people.
Well, they would be bringing,
non-quorum.
no. I'm saying they're a subcommittee that works on bringing it back to the commission. And then there would be a vote on it.
The subcommittee just can.
Does a
not
study.
exceed 3 people.
Okay, 3, whatever.
That's.
Okay.
Here's, if I may, I don't wanna.
Here's your mic.
So we wanna make sure, we don't wanna have surprise agenda items.
No.
So first, I think, just like there is a planning department activity report, there should be a non-quorum proactive subcommittee report on the agenda every time. And if the report was, it's summer, we didn't meet, that's fine. Or we talked about marshmallow balloons, and we think this is a very important item for the city council to consider. how does the rest of the commission at large feel about marshmallow balloons? So then it's a fixed item on the agenda, so we're not guessing what are we gonna put on there? And if, as in this example, well, yeah, we really should talk about marshmallow balloons, then it becomes a discussion item for a later agenda. So there's an organization and no surprise, and it's consistent. And then the non-quorum subcommittee, I think there should be just some very general rules associated with that. One is non-quorum just for resource reasons, like we've kind of talked about in our past meetings. And it must allow for a rotation. So it's not necessarily usurped by a few different people. Now, if other people simply don't want to be involved, that's fine, but the opportunity for rotation should be there. And that's embodied in this meeting. Okay, well, do we want to continue with these three people, or will someone else have another interested topic maybe they'll want to bring in? So you have that rotation. And I think just those basic things, and the item will help determine, the appropriate public participation, the appropriate research. That stuff will kind of, it'll be topic specific. But if we get it on the agenda, that provides the opportunity for discussion, and that discussion provides the opportunity for more specific items, it provides that organization and that consistency, and then it uses the framework of these meetings, okay, well, it was summer, we didn't meet at all, it gets captured in the minutes, so it's not a quorum, but you're still using the infrastructure of this, so then it's in the record and it's organized.
In having the subcommittees, we could have two things going at once. Like you could have had the kayak dog. And we've been talking about doing an historic update.
Sure.
So you could have,
Could be reporting on two separate things.
that's right.
Yeah, why not?
What do you think?
What I'm hearing is avoid duplication. What you've listed here is pretty much a duplication of what planning commission does already, but it would be in a separate grouping. And why doesn't the membership of the planning commission get together and look around and see what each person or the people find that they think should possibly be addressed?
That's what he said.
Then let's votes on it, bring it to the planning commission for agendas and research particular items over and above whatever our regular planning commission meeting is.
That's what was said, although
And
Jacob
then
wants
bring
it.
back to put it on the agenda for the official planning commission.
So I'm just trying to understand what is the.
Yeah.
What is the, let's say you had some burning
You have a
idea.
group of three of you that go out that have an idea of what you would like to, as far as changes, upgrades, whatever in the city. Bring it to your group, know what you think group of members would like to work on or would be paramount at this time. Or set up a schedule. And then attack it.
Yeah, that sounds kind of like the outline.
You're gonna have to do the research individually and as a group to find what it is
Isn't that what you wrote?
that's above and beyond what the planning commission right now is working on.
Right.
That's what.
And I think there would be a design of that. I mean, what the code says is that we're able to study things if we want to. I mean, they're,
But like, if you came up with the city docs and he came up with whatever, and then somebody else came up with the swimming pool adjustments, God only knows. Get the whole group together, because there's gonna be somebody other than Catherine, and there's gonna be Bugsley. And get a vote on all of it as to what really takes precedence. 1, 2, 3, whatever, and work on it.
And that's kind of when I talk about having the embodied non-quorum subcommittee report, that gives that opportunity for the report for the discussion at large. And the discussion at large kind of helps filter out.
I agree at large on what the particular item is going to be that you're gonna attack first, second, third, whatever.
different commissioners may have ideas, different ideas about what they
Yeah,
want to
And
look
that's
at.
where
But there might be 2 or 3 different things going at once.
the precedence,
What's that?
where you start. Where number one's gonna be.
Well, I think the commission would decide what the priorities are depending on the needs of the. I mean, there are some things that I have ideas that we could take on and I think there are.
Such as? What is the process?
I'd rather not right now, but I could. I mean, it depends on how, okay, so, just some things that we could be interested in. I'll give you an example, but it may be nothing, I don't know if this would be something
I'm
you're
not saying it has
interested in.
to, no, just.
Okay, there's a few things. Architectural standards, beyond what we already have, outlined in the Riverfront plan. And development of architectural standards within the qualified opportunity zone, for example. That would be something we could look at, like how do we make the town look consistently? Is that something we want to do? That would be number one, which would kind of dovetail off of historical property being looked at. Something that I thought, I watched the last council meeting. And we got a water report. We did not get a sewer report, but our sewers are in need of.
That was done.
You weren't on the commission yet, Steve.
So there was a sewer and so all three, there's been sewer, water and storm. The other two were done last.
Oh, last year I missed those. Okay, so at the last council meeting, there was an assignment to our city planner to come up with how to, ideas of how to pay for some of the sewer infrastructure, which was tagged at $10 to $15 million and was going to involve some potentially unpopular money being spent on behalf of the public. And I thought, that's a lot to put on Jacob. Even though he's got big shoulders.
Yeah, it's a team, it's not just the city planner.
Okay, but maybe that's something the planning commission could work on. Maybe we don't want to work on it, but I could tell you there's a lot of ways that I think our neighboring cities make money and to raise money that the planning commission could get involved with and maybe take on some heavy lifting on some issues that face fiscal issues. So those are two ideas that I would potentially, somebody could potentially pitch and say, yeah, we would be interested in that. Let's go ahead and move it on. Let's do this. So I just gave you a couple ideas. You asked me for some, I have some.
So what I was hearing Jacob saying is, we've got these different agenda items that are always on here. That we would have a
committee would be?
Non-quorum subcommittee.
Non-quorum subcommittee report.
Is one of the
Yeah,
lines.
that could be,
And then you'd like to have the subject.
Well,
It would not be a subject, it would be a vote on a subject and then that item would
Okay.
get added
Yeah.
to a discussion item.
so as example, let's say I'm the subcommittee reporter.
Right, right.
Well, we talked about this really seriously. And, we really think the city council needs to focus on marshmallow balloons. Why is the city council not focusing on marshmallow balloons?
Because we are doing widgets.
See, so then, so in that report, and that's the opportunity for the
Okay,
commission to discuss at large.
Right.
God, I didn't really think about marshmallow balloons. Maybe we should think about that. Or there's enough people, no. But that fixed agenda item becomes the catalyst for further conversation. That further conversation then can become pre-identified discussion items. Okay, well, next month, we do want to talk about marshmallow balloons. And so then in the next month's agenda, discussion item, discussion of marshmallow balloons. Of course, I make something up, so that way, we're picking on something legitimate.
I want widgets finished first.
it wouldn't
Fire
necess-
department doesn't allow
it wouldn't
marshmallows.
necessarily have to be an item. It's a spot in case someone has something. So it wouldn't have to be a report every month.
right.
I mean, we're busy all summer, in the middle of summer or something else. It's gonna happen. It's okay.
I think
There's a spot for it. And it's not a spot for who knows what. It's for you, it's for someone to say, okay, here's this thing that we'd like to investigate. Here's the issue. And I think we can at least look into it. And it's just something that you do want to bring to next meeting.
The subcommittee would work between that moment it's decided you're working
Yeah,
on it.
They
Until the
decide if
agenda
that's a
item.
good idea.
Correct.
They may have to do some research to figure out if it's even worth spending any time on, wasting our time on it. Or whatever. So the next month they go, okay, we did our research, we didn't just talk about it. And here's something that here's how we do it. And then we go, okay, yeah, we think that would be a good thing to spend more time on.
Why does it
It's a
have to,
three-step thing.
why does it have to come out of a subcommittee? Why couldn't it be just any planning commissioner could put an agenda item on? There has to be warning of it, just can't, and there should be some materials presented that, and people should have at least a week to look at them in advance. And then people could say, hey, look, this is a good idea or not, but you may not be able to meet in committee, or maybe somebody says, this is a good idea, and they're not on the committee or whatever.
Yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable with the committee because the committee isn't necessarily static.
Exactly, so.
So the idea may come from one person and a subcommittee is gonna work on that.
Yeah, the idea.
But the subcommittee can't bring an idea
Yeah.
if there's no group that's, thinking about that already. We gotta start somewhere.
So should we have a fixed agenda item that is just proactive brainstorming?
Well, it has
That
to,
way it's not,
initially be that, at least sometime.
that way it's not limited to a subcommittee, that way it can be an individual?
Why wouldn't you have that individual come sell it to the commission and the commission would see who wants to be on that subcommittee?
I mean, it could still be
And
the
we'll
same,
start the process.
still be the same time slot. It's subcommittee / brainstorm. Because one month you're gonna have the subcommittee, well, they would have an agenda item, wouldn't they?
First time out, you would just have.
So the agenda, it would be a separate agenda, it would be on a subcommittee report. Right? The next one.
Yeah, so the idea is there's that default one that's every month, that's the opportunity, that's the soapbox. And then that discussion could result in the more defined discussion item for a subsequent month.
You could have two sections of that.
Where I want.
So
Well, there's-
I wouldn't limit it.
Depending on how you wanna do it.
Business, and then the one, the subcommittee that's bringing something back. I'm not trying to add more to it.
Yeah, so what Toski said about having things in a week in advance, that would be if in your standing item, you've already decided on a topic that the commission has moved forward on, and then you added a discussion item for that. And that is a report from that subcommittee in the packet.
So meeting in November. There's that fixed item, whatever we call it. And
Catalyst, that's it.
Yeah.
Subcommittee catalyst time,
Well,
special
Well, I like this, the soapbox idea.
Clash.
It's good, it's sort of a, was that, what you think?
puppy clash.
yeah. Chamber.
but then that fixed item results in a discussion that could result in a future item up here, but you still have that fixed item.
So ad hoc subcommittee catalyst, period. Whatever, it's something, it's a springboard, what do I wanna call
Springboard soapbox, yeah, I don't know what you wanna call it, I guess we
it?
can.
Soapbox, because that's, you know.
Yeah, that's a little.
It's gonna be something we're gonna work on, not just somebody else.
Yeah.
Any discussion?
I mean,
Yeah, but I think it's gotta be on the agenda a week in advance, so that, you know, here we're working on something and the chair says, hey, you know, it's getting late, can we put this off to next week? I say, yeah, let's do that.
Well, it has to be short. It has to be a short thing. It's just an idea.
Right, it's an idea.
Catalyst idea, it's not a full-blown plan, because that's what the subcommittee is gonna come back with.
Right.
That's when it gets on the
It doesn't
agenda.
have to be long, it shouldn't be long. So it's not gonna be a problem, you know, on the agenda. No surprise of an hour and a half discussion.
I think we should really
Right.
enforce kind of like a visitor comment, like it's 5 minutes. Keep it to 5, if it's taking
I
longer than
totally
5
agree with that.
minutes,
Sure.
Yes.
then you continue it the next standing item if
Yeah.
there's more discussion.
And then we can go, okay, Jacob's saying, we've got three hearings and they're gonna each take 4 hours.
We're
Maybe
not
it's
gonna
not,
have-
it's not a good time to do the discussion item.
Right, exactly.
Then,
Yeah, and delay it a month.
I mean, some days are this long.
So really, the gatekeeping happens at that standing item.
I'll keep it to 5 minutes.
And I think we should put in parentheses, limited to 5 minutes, that way it's clear on the agenda
Just like this.
every time, we get used to seeing that.
Yeah, so that's simple, succinct, and easy to follow in 5 minutes.
Why don't we just call it topics from the commission? Cause it's topics from the floor.
Well, I
Topics to work on, I mean,
think the idea would be that it would, if you formally made the request, so you do your 5-minute pitch. The idea would be the commission would then vote, and say, okay, do we want to hear more on this? Are we not interested in it? What do we want to do with this? And then we should probably have fairly defined sets of things to do, at least initially, so we can get through it quickly. Do we want to hear more on it? Yeah.
Basically.
When do we want you to come back and maybe have like a drop down menu almost? And then the second pitch, if you would, is the one that is a little more detailed and a little more in-depth.
that's for the subcommittee and that's the discussion items.
When you put the
Right.
subcommittee to work.
Right.
You do that right away if they decide.
Yeah.
Yeah, then you put the subcommittee to work and then you come back in whatever amount of time and say, okay, this is what we found, this is where we're headed. Then there has to be another gatekeep, say, okay, yes, let's,
And
we want to go in this direction.
Don't do all the work,
Then you
Oh,
work
just-
it from there.
set up the work, that's what subcommittee is gonna do first. So it's something we, then brainstorm and go, your idea was a little complicated to begin with, but in the subcommittee, we got it gelled into something that's workable, something we could do.
And then that's what a breakdown of
Any ideas on,
what you really are gonna think about.
okay? So the purpose of this discussion was to sort of come back with more of a procedural refinement. That we could, because I mean, one of these days, maybe all of us will be off the planning commission. You never know what.
You're gonna have new people floating in.
I thought you did a good stab at the procedural ones that refined as we talked today.
Okay.
Does it need to be codified?
It need to be codified now, I suppose, but.
Well, I think I'll come back. The idea was we would have a discussion, then I come back, and I do think we have to have a jurisdiction. I think you gotta say, it can't be something you're interested in. It has to be something that's within our jurisdiction.
Sure.
Yeah.
We don't want to take over someone else's job. This is appropriate.
Okay. So is it okay if I bring back something a little more refined next time? That's gonna be, simple, succinct, and easy to follow?
Yeah, so I mean, and that's, and because of that, Steve, because this is something that it's gonna be, well, I have very little time to prepare the memo. I didn't have time to read it, so I'm just like, well, I don't wanna put this in raw. So, and I this, the first time I read this was today about 4:30, so,
Same.
Is this you?
yeah.
Oh, good.
But it,
Excellent.
we deal with so many complexities. This is something we have control over. For God's sake, let's keep it simple.
Yeah.
But for everybody's sake.
Yes.
Including the general public.
I have to admit, I did kind of procrastinate a little bit, and we really sort of started meeting several days ahead, like exchanging this document, and then, so I'll say that I will try to get the simple, succinct,
One page.
and easy to follow procedural outline circulated,
Do a
and
basic
then back
outline.
to you guys at least a week before
The packets
the
go out.
packets go out, so that you will have 2 weeks for feedback from staff.
Yeah, maybe we can just boil it down to make the next meeting even more efficient.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on to the next item. We have one less planning commission.
We have one less planning commissioner. This is her. Thank you for the time. I don't have time anymore. So Catherine has resigned, and I didn't realize she had been here since 2013. So she almost had a decade. So it does mean that, well, we have it open again. And the main thing I wanted to get from this meeting is who, I don't know when the interviews are gonna be, it's still open. But I wanted to see who was interested in being on the planning commission interview committee.
Nominate the same people that I interviewed with. Only Russ and Jennifer.
Is that for an immediate interview?
This, well, this,
Or
It closes.
this will, yeah, it closes in, I don't know, 20 days.
Any responses?
We have one so far.
She applied for the Parks Commission too. She interviewed yesterday.
Yeah, so let's see what happens
I'm
there.
trying to get people to apply. I mean, anybody I think might be good, I'm like trying to get people to apply.
But if we have people to interview, we always like to figure out who the interview committee will be.
we should do like a 3-month or a 3-month stint and then have a time limit for whoever is the committee. So that, you know, if, since you're gonna have
What are we talking about?
Catherine, you're gonna have coming up.
Must know.
It's
Yeah, no, but
not absolutely, I think that the code says can have 7, doesn't have to have 7.
Yeah.
So, but I think it'd be best to have 7.
Yeah, because there's
Fill it.
there's the perfect storm of, we have a hardcore case. Someone's gone on a cruise, another person had a funeral and 2 people are sick, and then,
Abstentions too.
oh yeah, abstentions, good point, yeah.
I don't know, but I want my job at the marshmallow balloon factory. They're working overtime now.
Always
Yeah,
get
I
back
know
to it.
quorum one time. I
That's
think.
my other job.
It was.
Yeah, so it's but when we have a full group, it's just it really reduces the odds of that. Yeah. And there's nothing worse when there's all this time, especially everybody's lawyered up, and then you don't have a body that can make a decision.
We're lawyered up, I'll tell you.
No, it's, yeah, having to reschedule public hearings is not fun.
But I mean, our own committee rules say when there's a vacancy, we're supposed to advertise. You know, there's those committee rules that the council adopted many years ago now, that we're simply following.
So when is it close?
What's the date on this? Roughly the end of April.
Well, is there a date?
There is,
Looking it up.
but I don't have that in my mind.
She can get it by the end of the meeting, Christina.
Just because I am telling, I'm basically telling anybody that
Well,
they
we-
might be interested to apply.
If she goes on the Parks Commission, let's say, she can't be on two commissions.
That's right.
No, but she can
But then
interview.
are we just going to advertise again?
There's no,
Well, if she goes on the park, she can still interview for this and quit the parks. She might be their shortest member, but
This goes back to what Sheila said.
there was another candidate for the Parks Commission too. There were 2 interviewees, so they did have
April 29th.
Okay, so yeah, that was, because we did it, I let Kathy know right away. The committee rules do say that generally, you're only supposed to be one committee or commission at a time, but the council may waive that when there's a public interest. I think a good example would be if someone's on a budget committee, because it's so finite. You know, it's not a monthly meeting, and then another one that may be appropriate. Parks and Planning Commission, those are pretty involved committees. I think that would be. You need a pretty hardcore volunteer to have 1 foot in each bucket there. But we'll see what happens. Sometimes we get people signing up at the end.
So we've got an answer for sure on who the interview committee would be if we get it. Right. We need one.
3 is the max.
We need one for one person even.
Yeah.
If you only have one, how do you make a selection of one?
Well, we need one
I mean,
person,
what's
one
the-
choice.
You don't have, you can go back.
Well, if there's only one person and the committee says, well, we don't want to interview, then we don't.
Well, we've had one person that wasn't appropriate. The committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to recommend.
Yeah, actually, they could,
get that.
that's a good point. The committee, are you sure you want to be on this? So yeah, the committee actually helped acted as a filter.
Yeah.
So thanks for Dan for reminding me of that.
In the fall, guys. Filter is a nice word. We're back to marshmallow balloons.
If you use abstractions for explanations, then the press can't beat you up for, oh, but they said this in the news.
Teach you that in school?
Did they teach you that in school?
No,
No.
it's called tap dancing in public service. So
I'm okay with the previous interview committee.
yeah, I think we would,
The same.
I don't know.
Jennifer would probably be okay with it. She's not here. We want to confirm.
She would probably do it.
Chances are she would.
Yeah, for not being here.
Her name on it.
As an alternative, I would do it.
Okay, so it was Audrey, Russ,
If Jennifer says no, then.
Wasn't Jen?
Yeah.
I don't want that.
and then Dan is our backup.
Jennifer.
I used to not ask to be on because I was working at Salem all the time, but. So.
Okay, so yeah, thank you. We'll see how that goes. And I just, because, you know, we may have interviews before the next meeting and we like to be efficient, especially in spring. Spring is all about people wanting to get their permits through. And so,
Really?
I thought you might have known something in the strength.
You see all the
well, it's this was a pretty weird one.
State level is the same.
Oh, yeah.
And even on slow years, spring is always busy.
Yeah.
Quite a
I think, anybody have anything you want to ask the planning director about its decisions?
Yes.
I had another,
I did read them and they all look good.
I have some FYI items.
Jacob and I talked about this.
Right.
to the plans
You
for that.
ready? You're good? Did you get a chance, Russ? You're good? To look at the department report?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Go ahead, do it.
So the annual Boards and Commission Dinner Appreciation Day is coming up. It's on the 28th of April, and if you want to go, you need to RSVP by Friday. Kathy, you all know about that? Did you get the announcement? Everybody nodding. It's at 5:30, and it's gonna be at the community center, the new community center on Gable.
Went up by the high school.
Yes, yep.
I was
Yeah.
thinking it was down.
over there. The old church, yeah.
Yeah,
Do a double duty, you get to see the new community center if you go.
yeah, that's what I was just
I think
thinking.
Wild Current is catering.
Oh, nice.
So there's a press release that's gonna come out next week. You're all getting the head scoop on it. The RFQ for the Riverfront development solicited 2 developers. Russ, Steve, and Jennifer are on the selection committee with council and some staff. We're gonna meet, so the developers that submitted are RKM Development, Roy Kim, and then Atkins Dane Incorporated submitted. So they will both be giving presentations to council on their qualifications. So not like a site plan of what they would develop, but what their just basic overall vision for the site would be. And that'll be in May, May 11th at 4 o'clock. So that meeting is intended for council and the subcommittee, but the public is invited to come. So it's not like an open house where you get to ask questions or anything like that, but it's just educational. And then the following week, the subcommittee will deliberate. So they'll meet and talk about what they saw in the presentations and then also what they read in the proposals from those 2 developers. And then finally, they'll make a recommendation to council, who will make the decision on which developer to move forward with or to resolicit if we don't like either that day, so the 18th. So the press release that's coming out will have all of this dates and times in it. It'll have the links to the meetings, all that. I just wanted to give you a heads up. We're really excited about the qualified developers that submitted. Their history and body of work is pretty extensive. They have a long history of doing public-private partnerships, which is a rare, not all developers do those. And so they have the type of expertise we would hope to have on this site. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. I think that the presentations will reveal a lot about them and I'm hopeful that you can watch it. It'll get recorded. So you don't have to attend it live. But yeah, it's a big deal.
I think one thing
It's a really big deal.
I noticed, which is different than the exclusive agreement we had with Tocola, was that the proposal was very much dependent upon getting public funding for some of the development of the waterfront, whereas it seems these other 2 proposals are not so, their ideas may not be so dependent on whether or not we get grants from the federal government or the states that might be able to finance it in different ways.
That may also be because of our loan,
Yeah,
but yeah,
right, but still,
no, it's a good point. And they also didn't want the whole site. You know, these guys wanted master develop the whole site, which is a preference of the city rather than do it in chunks.
So they'll go away or went away or?
He didn't submit. I mean, he was notified of it, of the RFQ.
His original role is gone.
I mean, not necessarily. Roy Kim could partner with other developers within his lens. So could Atkins and
What was he the one sole person for the company? Originally, yeah.
He wanted to do a mixed use residential commercial building and a hotel.
I mean, we accepted him in some way, right?
Right.
for some period of time and that period of time's ended or?
Correct.
It
Okay,
did,
that's what I'm asking.
Right,
Yeah,
and
that
we-
was back in 2017.
yeah.
And boy, am I glad that didn't move forward, because so much has changed
Yeah.
since 2017.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, so,
And one reason it didn't move forward is because we had applied for those federal transportation or grants.
Yeah.
And we did not get them, so their proposal was dependent
I
upon
see.
whether or not we got
All right, so that's-
so then that initiated the loan program that we applied for, because we're like, we gotta fund this public infrastructure.
Yeah.
So now we're further along and now we're able to attract bigger fishes to the site, so.
The other one, the first one's scary. When you say all that, the public funding and that,
You mean Tocola?
yeah.
Well, there's scary and no longer in the picture as a
Yeah, I
partner,
know.
so.
I know.
And I know Halloween told me not to be scared, but
Susan heard.
Does the city have a plan on what kind of concessions with the developer they're gonna partner up with?
That's so far, I mean, that would be what the next step would be. So once we select a developer, we negotiate those terms and what kind of tools we have to make the financial picture make sense for them and us. That would be the next step. That's all I have for FYI.
it's a once in a multi-generational project.
You can tell you're really
Here we are.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's late, so I'm kind of
Yeah, I
tired, but
excited, just the way the tone of voice.
I'm so excited too.
Yeah. Very good. Nothing.
I didn't mean it to be like you, I'm sorry.
It's a once in a lifetime.
Okay, I think we can adjourn.